Naruto. Azure Cat, Crimson Fox. Prologue. Kumogakure no Sato. 8 years ago. Life wasn't fair. Monster. The child looked up at the owner of the voice, an old man, maybe in his 60s with a balding head. His rugged features holding that same expression he had come to accept, an expression of hate and malice which just served to numb his heart and soul even further. Looking up at this man, the boy wondered, not for the first time, why this was happening to him. Why did people look on him with such hate and fear? For as long as he could remember he had been treated this way. The orphanage, the children, random people on the street all looked at him with those icy stares. Sometimes they seemed to look straight through him, other times they were full of disgust, and sometimes, just sometimes they looked upon him with outright murder. He should not understand this, but his few years had forced him to grow up faster than someone his age should. To the naked eye he looked like an orphan, barely 4 years old, but inside he was twice that age. The old man approached. No one was coming to his aid. His fellow orphans seemed to scatter at this slightly drunken man's approach. The people who ran the orphanage made no move to help him. Some were even watching the event play out with a twisted type of enjoyment. "You're a monster," the man said, pointing a rickety cane at the 4-year-old blonde. "You killed my son, you crippled my daughter, and you will." Before he could finish his sentence, the blonde child got up from his place in the sandbox and exploded into motion, running away from the deranged old man and his ravings. The old man gave chase, waving his cane over his head like a baton. Again no one came to his aid, not the orphanage workers or the ninja that Gigi promised would save him. He ran through the iron gates, and followed a footpath along the gray stoned walls, following a trail which was well worn to him. He had run away from this place many times before, sometimes when people entered this place wishing to bring harm to him, or when the people who were supposed to look after him locked him out of the orphanage at night. Tears spilled freely from his oceanic eyes, his ears hearing the ranting of the old man who was threatening him. It wasn't fair. What had he done to deserve this? Why did no one help him? Why did the people hate him so much? Why? He turned the corner, his eyes closed to try and stop the flow of tears escaping them, only for him to collide with something. He bounced back, landing on a heap on the floor. He stirred, looking up to see what he had rushed head-on into. He was met with a frowning face of a woman. Her skin pale and smooth, eyes were a dark brown and shoulder-length blonde hair mapping out every contour on her face. She wore a headband across her forehead, partially hidden by the bangs of blonde hair, but it didn't have the leaf symbol he was familiar with, rather it was of 3 cloud-shaped markings, 2 of which seemed to be joined. Upon seeing him, the woman's frown shifted to confusion, then to concern. It was an entirely new scenario to him, as anyone he had met before had eyed him with discord and revulsion. It was then that the old man came, spinning around the corner, his cane held in his hands only to stop upon seeing the woman, who was now kneeling beside the blonde-haired child. She spoke, her words melodic and soft. "Are you all right?" The boy hesitated, moisture gathering along his eyes, ready for a release. The woman saw this and without hesitation picked him up in her arms, rocking him gently back and forth, her soft voice soothing to his ears. "Hush, there. You're safe now." The boy, not able to hold on to his emotions anymore, buried his face into her shoulder, sobbing and crying, dampening her clothing with his tears. She smiled softly, holding the boy in an embrace before setting a murderous glare upon the old man. Her killer intent flashed upon him, seemingly suffocating him under its intensity. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked softly so as not to frighten the child, yet with an unbreakable steel behind her words. The man backed away under her suffocating aura. Of course there were Kumonin around, it was to be expected. One of their top ninja had arrived in Konoha to sign a peace treaty with the Hokage and the Council of Fire. The high ninja had brought half a dozen ninja bodyguards with him. But he did not expect to see one of them wandering the streets so freely. The woman took a step forward. The demon child held in her arms. She repeated her question, this time with considerably less patience. "What is the meaning of this? Are you a coward who gets his kicks from scaring young children, or is there more to this than I am seeing?" The man began, fists balled up so tightly the skin on his knuckles turned white. He knew to utter these words were forbidden, and carried with them great punishment. But he didn't care anymore. "He is a monster. He killed my son, he crippled my daughter, and he must pay for his sins." The women looked down at the child, and then back up at him, eyebrows raised in disbelief. "Are you ill, sir? A 4-year-old doing such harm is hard to believe." "He is the demon," the man crowed angrily. "He holds within him the monster which attacked this village nearly half a decade ago. He must be made to pay, he must." The woman's eyes widened, then realization hit her. The world had been led to believe that the Ondaime Hokage had defeated and killed the Kyuubi no Yoko himself at the cost of his own life. Before she could ask further, she felt a blur of motion, and 3 members of the Konoha Anbu shimmered into existence, dressed in the armored attire of the Hokage's personal elite guard, porcelain animal masks covering their faces. One put his hand on the old man's shoulder, his expression and intent invisible behind his mask. "That's enough out of you, old man. Time to go." The old man looked at the masked ninja fearfully, before being led around the corner by another Anbu agent. The intent was clear: he was to be arrested and hauled to whatever incarceration facility awaited those who released important information to the enemy. The leader turned to the Kumonin and bowed respectfully before her. "My apologies, he is but an old man, deranged by the terrible tragedies in his life. He blames everyone around him for his loss." He was trying to erase suspicion, but she wasn't buying it. She could afford to play his game for the time being though. Even if he suspected that she believed the ramblings of some half-insane old man, he couldn't do a thing to her, not with her diplomatic immunity as a foreign ambassador. She was startled when the Anbu raised his hands but gave no outward sign. "Thank you for protecting the boy, but we need to return him to the orphanage." She looked down at the child to see that he was sound asleep in her arms, his face completely innocent to the world. He looked so adorable that for a moment she did not wish to let him go. But she relented, and tentatively placed the child into the Anbu's waiting arms. "It's quite all right. I have seen many a man lose his sanity with the death of loved ones." Without hesitation she turned and walked up the road, leaving the Anbu to look after the boy. Outside she was composed. Inside she was brimming with excitement. That boy was just like her. He had been forced to take a great burden he did not deserve, just like her. Besides herself, the woman immediately felt a kinship for the boy. She would need to report this to the High Ninja, perhaps add another name to the small one-person list of abductees he had. The abduction attempt was a failure. The High Ninja was dead, killed by the Hyuga. Konoha was on high alert. Even now the Anbu were hunting down her fellow ninja. They had abandoned the hotel they were staying in and scattered in all directions, set to meet up at the rendezvous point. She jumped from rooftop to rooftop, ignoring the torrential rain as it fell from the darkened night skies and drenched her clothes and exposed skin, matting her blonde hair. She stopped suddenly, looking down at that same drab building of gray stone and timber she had seen a day before. This was the same building where she had met that boy. Besides the situation, her curiosity got the better of her and she jumped down onto the 2-meter-high stone walls, looking down at the courtyard of the orphanage. There was the same boy, sitting on a swing, the cords tied to a sturdy tree branch, looking at the orphanage's closed door with hollow, dejected eyes. She gritted her teeth. Those bastards must have locked him out in this storm. Forget about her suspicions about him. No one treated a child that way. No one. She jumped down from her perch, landing at the other side of the courtyard, and started walking towards the boy. Her leader had failed in gaining a Hyuga in their all-seeing eyes. But she may be able to salvage the situation, and perhaps offer this boy a better life. She knew she was tempting fate by stopping, but she felt it would be worth it in the end. The child noticed her coming through the haze kicked up by the torrential rain, and immediately recognized her as the woman whom had saved him the other day. He smiled at her, a sad smile which she couldn't help but return. He did not fear her. Good. It would make this a lot easier. She reached out with her hand, beckoning him to take it. He hesitated, before reaching out timidly, and his little hand grasped onto hers. She gently pulled him to his feet and held him in an embrace, lips parting, whispering the words to a low-level genjutsu to put him to sleep. The journey would be long and treacherous, and she did not wish to scare him. His eyes drooped, his body became slack, and after a moment he fell into her arms, asleep and oblivious to the world. She scowled at his appearance, soaked to the bone, his gray shirt and pants clinging to his skin, his hair matted by the rain. Any longer and he would have caught a bad case of pneumonia. The woman looked at his face and picked him up in her arms. She took a deep breath, fell into a crouch and jumped up high. She ran across the rooftops, the only evidence of her passing being the tapping of her sandals against the timber roofs, the splashing of water as she went through puddles with blurring speed. Eventually the roofs ended and the huge vertical surface of the city walls towered before her. Concentrating her chakra into the soles of her feet, she jumped, making contact with the wall and running up the superstructure. She scaled it within seconds, ran across the empty walkway, hopped onto the battlements and jumped down to the forest below. Focusing her chakra into the soles of her feet yet again, she hit the first sturdy branch of a tree she came across, and took off running, jumping from sturdy tree branch to sturdy tree branch with a feline grace. Finally she arrived at the rendezvous point, a clearing nearly 10 kilometers from the village perimeter. She landed on a branch on the boundary and waited. As she waited, she heard a soft moan, and looked down to see the child stirring, his features grimacing as if in pain. She set him down, unslung her backpack and rummaged through it. Finding a brown cloak, she pulled it out and wrapped him snugly in it, to give him protection from the rain at least. His hand gripped her forearm, startling her. She looked down to see him still asleep, his other hand gripping onto the fabric of her brown cloak. His lips moved, a single word dulled by the pelting of the rain, but she was a master lip reader. Mommy. He must have been dreaming of his mother, most likely long gone by now, either dead or unable to care for him, or maybe she left him there to rot. The thoughts were thrown aside for later as she looked into the clearing, seeing a duo of shadowy figures exploded from the undergrowth and running to the center. They must have been two of the High Ninja's Chunin bodyguards, Haru and Ren if she remembered. Picking up the child, she jumped to the ground, landing on her feet like a cat and rushing towards the two darkened silhouettes, using the rain to mask her movements. They didn't notice her even when she was within 2 meters of their position. Thunder, she spoke the call sign, startling the two ninja. Lightning, they both piped up in unison. She rose from her place, a silent dark shadow in the night. They feared her, she knew they feared her, but they also respected her battle record and prowess. The head ninja is dead. The mission is a failure. We're moving out. Both nodded and were about to follow her, then Haru stopped, the large ninja looking at the bundle in her arms, particularly the blonde hair. What's that? She looked at him, an icy glare which made him shy away. Collateral. It took a week to traverse the dense forests of the Land of Fire. They could have used the dirt roads to the border, but Kumogakure would have most likely sent word about the failed attempt to the daimyo by now, and he would have put the entire country on full alert. The roads and settlements were bound to be watched, and the security in the borderlands was bound to have been tightened. They passed the border between Fire and Fang easily, and from there to Claw and finally to the borderlands of Lightning. By a week and 3 days they had made it to the border towns of the Land of Lightning, or more specifically the border town of Akaikumo. There they were scheduled to meet with the Raikage himself, and give him an in-field debriefing. They went to a local inn and paid enough for 2 rooms for a night. She placed the boy in her room, read the genjutsu and left Haru to guard him while she and Ren went down to the pub on the bottom floor. They took a table, ordered a couple of Kumo whiskeys and waited for their cage to arrive. It was another hour before he came, a huge mammoth of a man, easily twice her size and thrice her width. This was not due to fat but to muscle. Skin was a dark brown with slicked back white hair with a small mustache and beard. He wore simple Kumo ninja attire with dark gray fatigues and a high-collared jonin vest of the same color. To all those in attendance he was just another ninja of the Lightning Army, not the leader. He sat down on the chair, his dark eyes not leaving those of his 2 underlings. She respected few of the ninja, but this man was one of them. He could overpower his younger brother Kirabai, and he was the host to the 8-tailed beast. For someone like herself, who contained the 2-tailed monster cat, she believed he could easily subdue her. The mission was a failure, he said, his deep voice stony and gruff, and she found herself flinching under his words. Technically, she replied, her brown orbs making contact with his, but while we failed to capture a Hyuga we were able to get something else. His eyes rose in curiosity at this. What? A Jinchuriki, was her simple reply. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Maybe. I need someone to check the boy, but I believe he is a host to a tailed beast. Even Ran was surmised by this, but the Raikage, Iyatsuki, was completely mystified. Before a grin came across his face. I will have a sensor check the boy immediately, but if it is true then this will be more than enough recompense for losing my second. What news from Konoha? She asked, genuinely curious. We were able to turn it around, he replied. We have denied that we even tried to kidnap a member of one of their clans and have demanded that we have the head of the one responsible. And they agreed to it? She asked, genuinely surprised. The Raikage shrugged. They are weary of continuing the war. So are we. He smirked. But they don't know that. She sighed in relief. Before realization hit her, the Hyuga will undoubtedly seal his Byakugan away. There is still no way for us to attain the Gekkei Genkai. Maybe, the Raikage replied dismissively. It was no secret that he and the next in line for his mantle didn't get along. In fact, there were rumors that the head ninja had been secretly preparing to try and seize power in a coup. But if this boy is indeed a host, the loss will be nothing great. What will become of him if he is? She asked, suddenly worried for the small child. Obviously he will go through the same training you and Kirabai have. If he is to become a tool for the village, then he needs to contain and control his beast. As for accommodation, I doubt anyone in the village will take him in. Though they respect Jinchuriki for their power, they still fear them. The words left her mouth before she thought about them. I will take him in. Once again the Raikage's brow rose for a moment, before it descended into a frown. Are you sure? You do realize that with your power I can't just let you go to raise a child? Of course not, I am one of your weapons after all, was her thought, but she kept it down. He was not caged when she had the demon sealed, he was not to blame. She respected the man, but that was all. She was only 2 when she had her demon sealed inside her, and for a while she hated the village and the country for it. After a while though, she realized that walking down that path would only lead to her becoming an unstable monster like the rumored Sanbi and Rakubi of Kumogakure, the village hidden in the mists. That and the Nibi was not as bad a monster as she had originally thought. In fact, the creature was pensive of her being forced upon such a burden and had basically taken her as its kin. It was the main reason why she was able to control the two-tailed cat the way she did. I know the hardships of the life of a Jinchuriki, she replied. If the boy is, then he will need someone who knows what he is going through. Besides, if things go the way you think, there will be no war, so we will go back to peacetime activities. No need for a weapon like myself. He thought about this for a while, before sighing in resignation. Very well, if he is a host, then I will make you his guardian until he is old enough to begin his conditioning. But remember this, if war comes you will be recalled immediately. You will still do missions for the village and the nation. He opened his eyes, hardened orbs staring at her. Is that clear? She nodded. It is clear. Then I bestow upon you, Yugito ni, the A-ranked mission of taking care of the boy. He said you will be given the same salary as you did when you were an active ninja. This is to look after the boy's needs. I take it your apartment is suitable for a second person? Yugito bowed slightly, eyes closed. It is. He is your responsibility. Hi, Raikage-sama. Chapter 1, 4 years on. Borderlands of Hai no Kuni. 4 years later. She ran through the underbrush of the forest, pushing aside the branches of bushes and small trees as she went. Exhaustion slowed her. She was covered in a fresh sheen of sweat, clothes dirty and torn, blonde hair matted, probably didn't smell very well either. Running from Kumogakure, through the mountainous terrain of the Land of Lightning, the 2 small nations of Claw and Talon, and into the plains which dominated the border with Kumogakure without stopping was an impressive feat, one which few ninja below A rank could achieve. However, even someone like her had limits, and she needed to stop and rest, but not until she reached the huge forests, not until they were safely within cover. Finally they came to the forest outline. Massive trees rose up in the distance, unnaturally huge creations easily the same size as a 5-story building. She entered the forest, and kept running till she came across a clearing. She quickly scanned the perimeter. Even if there was a ceasefire with the Land of Fire, they were still in hostile territory. Confident they were safe, she knelt into a crouch, and let her passenger's feet touch solid ground. He staggered for a moment, his joints numb from lack of use. She turned to him, and despite her exhaustion and their current predicament, she couldn't help but smile at him. We'll rest here for a while. He nodded and watched with curiosity as she went to work, unslinging her backpack and pulling a few small scrolls from satchels. What are you doing, Kasan? She smiled at him. He had always been curious about everything there was to know about being a ninja, and she had always patiently explained whatever he wanted to know. I'm going to plant some perimeter seals around our camp so we don't get snuck up on. He nodded and yawned, his own exhaustion apparent. It had taken nearly 2 days to traverse the terrain between Kumogakure and here. He had not slept during the entire trip, and neither did she. She placed a hand on his shoulder and gave it a squeeze. Take the sleeping bag out of the scroll and get some rest, she said softly, taking out a small scroll and handing it to him. He took it, but didn't move, his little oceanic eyes full of worry. You'll be close, right? She nodded, and gave him a hug. I'm not going anywhere, Naruto-kun. You promise? She leaned back, her almond eyes staring unflinchingly at his brilliant blue eye. Promise. He nodded in relief, before turning and moving towards a crevice in a large thick oak tree. He knew the enormity of their situation and was instinctually falling upon his own basic ninja training. One of his first lessons was how to live out in the field. When you need to rest, sleep in cover, keep away from any hostile eyes. For the last 4 years he had been trained in the ninja arts by some of the finest instructors in Kumo. They had mostly just taught him chakra control and manipulation, while she and a few others taught him several low-level ninjutsu and her own taijutsu fighting style. She heard a snap, and her head darted around, looking for any signs of danger. It was only a deer, a few meters in the forest. She allowed herself to relax. Although Naruto was valuable to Kuma, they wouldn't dare break the armistice with the Land of Fire. They weren't ready to start another war, not with herself and Naruto going rogue. At least that was what she hoped. She spent 10 minutes going through the forest, planting her perimeter seals into the earth before heading back to the clearing. Once there she noticed that Naruto was sound asleep, hidden within a hollowed-out tree. She smiled as she sat down beside him, leaning against the inside of the trunk, her hand brushing back his bangs of blonde hair. As she got comfortable she felt her own weariness like a slap in the face. Even with the Nibi's chakra sustaining her she could only go on for so long, and she had surpassed her limit a day ago. Digging her hand into one of the satchels on her jonin vest she fished out a small red pill, a soldier pill, and popped it into her mouth, ignoring the sour taste that came with it. The medicine got to work within a few moments, and she felt awake again. She could rest later, when she knew Naruto was safe. For now she would remain on a constant vigil. "You shouldn't do that, kitten." The soft, purring voice of her bijou made her jump. She caught herself and silently cursed. "Look at yourself. You're jumping at shadows. You haven't slept, eaten or rested in days. At the rate you're going you'll keel over from starvation, dehydration or exhaustion." "What choice do I have?" she replied, softly so as not to wake Naruto. "There is no way a pursuit team could keep up with you," the Nibi chastised softly. "They would be a day behind you at the least. Unless they sent Kirabai. He cares about the kid as much as you do. The council knows this so they won't send him." She was right, and as she tried to deny it she realized just how right the benevolent cat demon was. Her stomach hurt, her lips and throat were parched, and even with the medication she could still feel her eyes droop from lack of sleep. She heard a sigh. Her bijou spoke again, and this time her voice was pleading. "Kitten, eat something at least." She picked up her backpack and rummaged through it. Finding a ration bar she tore it from its paper confines and wolfed it down. She grabbed her canteen from her belt next, popping open the bottle and taking a gulp of water to help wash down the taste. Wiping her mouth she fell back against the bark and frowned when Nibi gave off a growl. "Not good enough. I saw a deer skimming the edge of the clearing." "Is this your hunger or mine?" she asked deadpan. There was a purr of annoyance. "You of course, you foolish blonde. That protein crap is not going to sustain you. It was designed to be a snack, not an actual meal." She groaned. Nibi never liked the protein bars. She was a feline, a carnivore, and as a carnivore she craved meat to sustain her, even though she didn't need it anymore. The trait had been passed down to her host. Her feline companion sighed again, and then purred worriedly. "Kitten, I'm worried about you. If an elite ninja came at you in your state you won't be able to put up much of a fight." The Jinchuriki sighed. The Nibi was right. "I guess you have a point." "Please kitten," the creature beseeched worriedly. "I'll remove the effects of the soldier pill from your system. Just please get some sleep." As she sat there, listening to the sounds of the forest and the soft snoring of the child beside her, her mind began to wander, remembering the turn of events which led her to this moment. Kumogakure no Sato, 1 week earlier. "It is impossible." They stood in the office of the rakeage, the walls and floor carved from the stone of the mountain the hidden village was situated on. Filing cabinets covered the walls, and in the center, overlooking a large window of the village, was the mahogany desk and chairs of the rakeage. This was where he made the decisions which affected the ninja population of the Land of Lightning. She had been called here by the rakeage himself. Beside her stood the rakeage's brother, her fellow Jinchuriki and close friend Kirabai Yatsuki, who had barged into the meeting uninvited, and when the elder asked him to leave he began spewing his usual badly worded rap phrases. Eventually the rakeage let him stay, on the condition he stop his useless anecdotes. She smiled as the usually aloof and insubordinate Hichibi container complied without question. He cared about Naruto too, saw the kid as like a little brother, and she surmised he had heard of this meeting on his progress and made sure he was there to attend it. The others were an assortment of Anbu captains and village elders. She had nodded a greeting to her fellow ninja and bowed respectfully to the village elders. The Anbu returned her greeting, while the elders just grunted and moved on. The worried looks of the ninja and the disappointment of the elders gave her cause for concern. It had been 3 months since Naruto began training under the Anbu and Seal Masters on how to control his tailed beast, and as much as she wanted to know how it was going, it was classified above top secret. Her son had always come home tired and exhausted, and when she asked how it was going he just smiled and reminded her that it was top secret. This gave her cause for further concern. Naruto had always confided in her. When something was wrong she was the first he would talk to and ask help with. After 3 months of conversing with the Kyuubi no Yoko, I have concluded that, at the boy's current level, it will be impossible for him to fully master it. She looked at the elder and head scientist of the project as he reported his findings, a frown on her face. Norimasa Sakamoto was a former Kuma Jonin, an old man in his 70s with thinning white hair and dark brown skin, who retired from service and became the chief scientist for the Science and Research Bureau. It was he who oversaw the conditioning of both herself and Kirabai. She didn't like the man, in fact she hated him. He had never hid his contempt for the Jinchuriki, not even with Kirabai, and he was the brother of the Raikage. "Please elaborate," he said with a frown. He didn't like the old man either. In fact she remembered when he came up in conversation the Raikage called him an old fossil who should have been buried years ago. She smiled at the memory, only to hide it behind her stoic mask once more. "The QB is the most powerful of the 9, its strength is so malevolent and vast that it is impossible for a normal human mind to control," the scientist replied, skipping through a few pages on his report. "Upon further examination and after several communications between beast and host I have come to a conclusion. While it will lend its chakra to the container to save its own life, it is not as, how should I say, compliant as the Nibi and Hachibi were." She didn't like where this was going, and from Kirabai's movements she saw he didn't much like it either. The towering Jinchuriki folded his arms across his broad chest, face set in a frown as he listened to the head scientist of the Science and Research Bureau. At his rate of progress he may never fully master the 9 tails of his transformation. The QB's chakra is just too vast and potent that its consciousness would encompass and take over his host. He would become more of a danger to the village than as its protector. The scientist suddenly shut his report, his eyes partially hidden behind his round glasses, unless he let the word hang in the air, not caring to reiterate further. The Raikage tapped his finger against the surface of his desk in impatience, before sighing. "Unless what?" "Unless we put him through the full conditioning." Yugito growled at this. The full conditioning was more like torture. The subject would be conditioned both mentally and physically to become a weapon. She didn't know the details, but what she did know was that the practice was cruel and inhumane in every sense of the words. When the training was complete the subject would lose all emotion, he would basically become a hollow shell of what he once was. The perfect killer. The Raikage growled at the scientist. "For a moment if we did that the boy would be nothing more than a shell of what he is now. No emotions, no individual thought, he would be stripped of all that makes him who he is. Such barbarism has been outlawed." "It is regrettable," the scientist replied, his almond eyes gleaming with a sick joy behind his glasses, "but necessary. I will be putting this forward in the council meeting later today." "But your agreement would make this much faster." "I refuse," he replied without hesitation, fixing the scientist with a glare which would have melted steel, lips twisted in a sneer of disgust. "And I will fight this motion of yours with tooth and nail. There is a reason why I banned all forms of that training, and I doubt you will gain enough support on the council to overrule me." A smile adorned the old man's face. "Of course, Raikage-sama, but I will still put my recommendations forward when the council meeting begins." The Council of Lightning, a council made of heads of the numerous ninja clans of Kumogakure as well as ninja commanders and village elders. They were at heart an advisory council, one who was created to help the Raikage in the day-to-day running of Kumogakure no Sato. They had some power, and although the Kage was the leader of the village the council could still overrule his decisions, but in order to do that they needed 80% of the members to agree. Such a thing had only happened twice in the history of the village. "You are welcome to do so, Sakamoto," the Raikage said tightly, "and my opinion will remain the same. Now leave me." The old man bowed, spun on his heel and stalked out of the office. He looked at both Yugito and B as he left, and the Nibi Jinchuriki could have sworn she saw a malicious smile on his face. She felt her body go numb. Sakamoto was a very methodical human being, and she used the term human very loosely. He would never make a play like this against the Raikage if he didn't have the support for it. The line of ninja filed out, but Yugito and Kirabai remained, eyes not leaving the Raikages for a moment. Likewise he did not shy away from their gazes but met them head-on. The door closed and she couldn't hold her diplomatic facade any longer. "Bastard," she growled. Kirabai nodded his agreement, before staring at his elder brother with an unusually stoic expression, his black sunglasses lowering to reveal dark almond eyes. "So bro, do we have anything to worry about?" The Raikage sighed, once again massaging his forehead. "The council does not side with him on many issues, but with the kid it's another story. He was supposed to start his training at 5. But thanks to your motherly instincts he was held back." "What are you implying?" "Don't play dumb with me, Yugito. I know you too well," he rebuked mildly. "By his age you had fully mastered using the Nibi. Kirabai was on his 4th tail transformation. At the moment the kid can barely control his single-tailed cloak. His anger clouds his judgment. The council is losing its patience. They want results, and Norimasa is giving them a way to gain those results." At the risk of turning him into another Rakubi she almost screamed, barely keeping her patience in check. He glared at her. "Do you think I will enjoy this? I will do all that I can, but if the council is against me there is little I can do." "You can overrule the council," she replied, but was stopped by a snort. "Even I have my limits. If I go against the council I risk losing my support with the clans, and without their support I can overturn the decision." She gritted her teeth, keeping her opinions buried deep within her mind. Instead she clenched her fists so tight the skin on her knuckles turned white. She lowered her head. "Excuse me." The Nibi host turned on her heel and stalked out of the office, leaving a worried Kirabai and a frowning E. They remained silent until the door closed, and E spoke, his words laced with weariness. "She has gotten emotionally involved with the child," he muttered. "I should have seen this coming." Kirabai sighed, pushing up his sunglasses. She was his guardian at first, but things took a turn for the worst. The elder brother frowned. "Stop that." "It's true," though the little brother continued. "At the beginning she saw it as another mission, but over time things changed. The kid is infectious, bro. Just by being with him you want to get to know him better. When he enters a room it lights up. My students are smitten with him. Yu-Gi-Oh sees him as a son, and I even see him like he's my little brother." The elder sighed. "I know. I like the kid too." "It's more than that," Kirabai said. "Before the incident with Konoha she was nicknamed the Ice Cat. She was always stoic and cold to everyone around her, bar me, you and her sister. But since she took the kid and she's opened up, I've seen her smile and laugh, in public." "He has been a good influence on her," he replied. "Before she met him her facade as a snow queen scared men off. Now her new appearance as a caring mother has drawn them to her like a moth to a flame." Suddenly he saw his brother with that look, and decided to nip it in the bud. "Don't even think about it." "What?" he replied, his face a mask of innocence. "I will not have you singing rap music at her window." "Not again," he replied deadpan. "Do you realize how many complaints we got? The amount of damage which needed to be repaired because of your little stunt?" "I was trying to serenade her." "Little brother, you serenade a person by playing a musical instrument. Classical tools like a violin are usually preferred," he explained impatiently, feeling a headache coming on. Where the hell was his aspirin? Not standing on the pavement shouting out your pitiful excuse of rap music. She liked it. "She fully transformed and tried to kill you, in the middle of the village. She looks so sexy when she's angry too." "Was being condemned to a hospital bed with chakra poisoning for 2 months really worth it?" He didn't hesitate. "Oh yes." She had been 16 during the Hyuga incident in Konoha, the lead bodyguard to the then head ninja. Trained to become a killer from the age of 2, ascended to the rank of Jonin at 8, a Chunin at 10 and a Jonin at 13. By her 15th birthday she had been selected as a member of the Reikage's own Anbu strike force, becoming a captain within 6 months of her selection. She had never even thought about settling down and raising a child. Her status as a Jinchuriki, a living sacrifice, had made the decision impossible for her. She was respected in her village. Her beauty made her a symbol of lust to many a man. But no one besides her fellow ninja wanted to get close to her. The only people she considered family before the incident was Kirabai, her sister and half of the Yatsuki clan. Then the incident happened, and she found herself looking after a little 4-year-old Jinchuriki. She hadn't planned on it happening. She was just supposed to be his guardian until he was old enough to begin the training. But over time something changed. She didn't know what or why, but he got to her. There was something about him. His personality naturally made him friends, and before long she found that she cared about him. By the end of their first year together he had started calling her mom, and she had let him. All her life she had been taught that she was only a weapon. There was no room for wayward emotions like love and hate. But she found that she loved this little boy. He showed her that there was more to her than just a weapon, that she had within her the emotions of a human being. She could love, hate, cry, laugh and smile just like all those she perceived as normal. They weren't related by blood, but they were as close as a mother and son. She stopped and looked around, frowning. She had walked through the village to the training grounds, a barren landscape of rock formations, separated by fences of barbed wire. For a while she wondered why she had come here. Then she remembered. He was training in basic taijutsu out here with her younger sister. If memory served, they said they'd be in the 50th training ground. And so they were. Both stood in the clearing, fully dressed in battle attire and preparing to begin another sparring bout. Her sister was a slender woman of fair complexion and natural blonde hair. She was promiscuously covered by a sleeveless, very short robe that left very little for the imagination. Beneath her garment was a layer of mesh armor that was probably quite uncomfortable despite its small size, when took into consideration her somewhat disproportionate bust. If the kid was uncomfortable with her sister's choice of attire, he didn't show it. He had gotten used to her sister's choice of clothing years ago. In contrast, Naruto wore a pair of baggy black pants with the symbols for Earth and Cloud etched into the outer pockets. A black shirt covered his upper body, and if one looked closely enough they would be able to make out the light armored suit underneath. She watched as Naruto and her sister bowed to each other, and then fell into the basic stance for the Kuroitora fighting art, the chosen fighting style for the Ni clan. Her sister took up a defensive stance, blocking and parrying Naruto's quick strikes and claw-like grapples with practiced ease born from years of practice. Yugito smiled as he executed a clawed punch, only for it to be blocked. He had learned the basics of the art quickly and was showing steady progress with each training session. At first she and her sister had thought he was a natural, but a week after they gave him the scroll she had woken up in the middle of the night, and went outside to get a breath of air, only to find him in the courtyard, slowly going through the basic motions of the fighting style. He trained constantly, mastering the forms through perseverance and hard work. Kuroitora, the Black Tiger, was a fighting art created by the Ni clan during the dark times before the formation of the villages. The style was formed after the demeanor and fighting strategy of an attacking mountain tiger. The techniques for the art were to claw, rip, tear and grapple with an opponent. The offensive strikes were lightning-fast hits, aimed for vital points across the human body to maximize damage, while the defensive was to grapple and subdue through submission holds and tosses. Naruto ducked a swinging spin kick and brought up his hands to grab her extended leg, trying to toss his larger opponent over his shoulder. She let him, only for her legs to wrap around his neck as her back hit the ground. She rolled, sending him flying to the soil. Her sister flipped onto her feet and fell into a basic stance, body stooped, hands shaped like claws at her sides, legs bent. She looked like a tiger ready to pounce. Naruto rolled to his feet and fell into the same stance. Then he saw her and smiled. "Hey mom." Her sister relaxed her stance and turned, a small smile of her own on her face. "You're back early, Yugito One-ijin. The meeting was faster than we thought." She came up to Naruto and bent over so they were face to face, a smile curling her lips. "You've improved, cub." He returned her smile with a trademark grin. "Yeah mom, Samui One-ijin has shown me a few new grapples." She looked up to her sister with a wry look. Samui Ni didn't back down in the slightest, instead her sapphire eyes were full of mirth. "You taught him advanced grapples when he doesn't know the basic stances yet?" Naruto pouted. "I know the basic stances, mom." She poked him with her index and middle fingers, gaining a flinch and an audible "Oh, you know them, but can you do them?" His pout remained in place, crossing his arms and looking away with a stubborn expression which made both women laugh. She straightened, and put her hand on his head, ruffling his spiked blonde hair. "Go over there and go through the stances. If I remember, you're still shady on the second and third forms." He groaned something about bossy women before turning and jogging over to the cluster of rocks. When he was out of hearing, her smile turned into a sour frown, and her sister looked at her with a raised brow. "What happened?" "Norimasa happened," she replied. "He's going to try and bring back the old practices to use on Naruto." Samui's eyes narrowed. "No way. The old man would never let that happen." Her little sister was a capable ninja. She was a chunin at 16, a master of the clan's jutsu and fighting styles, but when it came to politics she was an amateur. Even the Raikage has to bow down to the demands of the people. If the council vote unanimously in that bastard's favor, then there is little he can do. Samui emitted a throaty growl. "There must be something we can do." "We don't know if the council will back him yet." "But what if they do?" she asked. Yugito frowned, deep in thought before her face fell. She spoke in a small voice. Her sister had never seen her like this. "I don't know." With a sigh, the younger Ni put a hand on her shoulder and gave it a squeeze. She could always count on her. They were the last survivors of their clan. Their father and mother died during the Third Shinobi World War. Even when Samui knew about the Nibis, she had remained by her side as her little sister, steadfast and unmovable to those who taunted her. "It'll be all right," she tried to console. "Trust Raikage-sama. He won't let this go without a fight." "Yeah, you're right about that," she replied with a brave smile. "He'd probably demolish the council chambers if it passes. There is a reason why these practices have been banned." The Raikage bellowed in outrage. "If we put the boy through this, then we risk turning him into the greatest danger the village has ever known." "Your opinion on the matter is noted." Raikage-sama. Hoshi Tanaka, head of the Tanaka clan, said calmingly. She was a middle-aged woman of fair complexion with long blondish white hair, a long scar running through her right eye. "The training regime may seem a little severe," Sakamoto spoke up, sitting in his place on the council table, "but there are no other options. After extensive researching into the Kyuubi, I have found no other alternative to draw out its power. The chakra feeds off the boy's anger, his hatred and his fear. So far those three methods are the only ways for him to summon the demon's power." "What about the seal?" Kasumi of the Sato clan asked. "Can't you summon the seal masters to alter it? Allow the boy to converse more freely with the Kyuubi?" The scientist ceased her attempt with a wave of his hand. "That was the first thing I looked into. But as far as the art of sealing goes, the Yondaime Hokage has no equal, even today. The best seal masters in Kaminari no Kuni have done extensive research on the subject, only to come up on a blank. There are no references to the seal in any of our records. To tamper with it could bring disastrous consequences. What about the other methods, the ones which worked with the Nibi and the Hichibi? Old Sesame Yasutora asked. The man was one of the oldest ninja in the village and was considered the eldest of the elders. I have tried, Councilman Yasutora, the old Sakamoto replied patiently, but it is next to impossible. The Nibi no Bakaneko and the Hichibi no Kyogyu were reasonable for monsters. They understood the need to protect their hosts in order to survive. The Kyubi no Yoko doesn't seem to understand this, nor is it interested in making a deal with its container. He was holding something back. There was something he was not telling the council. The Raikage knew this by his demeanor, though he hid it well. What was more was that no matter how hard he tried, he could not shake the feeling that this entire meeting seemed to be scripted. Most of the council members were asking questions which they already knew the answer to. The scientist had let slip one piece of information. For one who is not the host to converse with the beast, he or she needed to have an intimate understanding of the seal which was used to bind it. Did you really converse with the Kyubi Sakamoto, or were you unable to? Norimasa looked to the Raikage with a frown, but before he could rebuke the lightning shadow beat him to the punch. I may not be a master of seals, but I know enough. If someone who is not the host wishes to converse with the beast, then they or a member of their family needs to either have or had a summoning contract with it, or they must have an intimate understanding of the seal used to bind the beast to its host. But you just said that you and the best of our country's seal masters could not understand the seal. The scientist looked at the man in confusion, bordering on panic. He had obviously not expected he to know anything about seals. I assure you, Raikage-sama, that there are other ways to commune with the bijou, and they have all ended in failure. Oh, then list off a few of these other options you have tried. Enough, Raikage-sama, please, Sesame pleaded, earning a glare from the cage that made him involuntarily flinch in his seat. These are simply my findings, Norimasa continued, coughing into his hand to regain the council's attention, his earlier surprise buried under his political facade. The only way for the child to gain the Kyubi's full power is to commune with him directly, and with his mind being so young he can be easily manipulated and corrupted by the bijou. So you want to turn him into an emotionless shell? He asked incredulously. It is the only way to be sure he remains in control of the creature, the head scientist replied. Do you know of another way? He looked to him, his murderous intent flashing to levels which made the others in the chamber nervous, before he deflated. No. Perhaps we can find a middle ground here. Renji Sato, another elder, spoke up. Place guidelines and safeguards to restrict the training in some of its more questionable elements. Sounds like a good idea. Then let us take it to a vote, Sakamoto said, standing as head of the Sakamoto clan and chief researcher of the Kumo Science and Research Bureau. I, Norimasa Sakamoto, vote yes. 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 I agree. Yes. Agreed. No. Yes. Yes. Agreed. Yes. No, he said numbly, knowing that it was now out of his hands. Then it is settled, the scientist said, hiding his smirk. Hi no Kuni, present time. She awoke with a start, sitting up and looking from left to right. The sounds of the forest were different. Where once there were birds squawking, there were now the continual speaks of crickets and other nocturnal insects in the air. It was dark, and difficult to see. The moon and stars obstructed by the canopy of the forest. Dark, it was night. How long have we been out? Suddenly she felt a pulsing sensation on her upper right arm, and gingerly pulled back the sleeve of her dark purple camouflaged suit. On her arm was the tattoo of an oak tree, the form separated into several smaller parts, each one signifying the perimeter of one of the early warning seals she had placed earlier that day. Most of them were colored black, while one on the left side was flashing red. She slid her body against the inner bark of the hollowed-out tree, pressing against it, and dared take a peek at the clearing. 3 dark silhouettes flashed from the forest edge, all rushing towards her position. A normal human wouldn't have been able to make out their attackers until they were right on top of them. Thankfully she was anything but normal. She activated one of the Nibi's gifts. The sclera and pupils of her eyes pulsed, changing color from their regular almond to a feral cerulean, the round orbs of her pupils thinning out into a vertical slit. Her perception changed, all color drained from her world, being replaced by blacks and whites as her night vision kicked into full effect. The 3 figures were ninja, all 3 wearing black pants and jacket, a high-collared flak vest worn over their clothes, signifying that they were jonin. They all were armed with kunai holsters strapped to their legs, and katana sheathed to their backs. But what caught her attention were the headbands they wore, 3 cloud markings, 2 of which were joined. She cursed slightly under her breath. The 3 were Kumonin, obviously a hunter team sent out in pursuit of her and Naruto. They came to the center of the clearing and stopped, forming the 3 points of a triangle, head darting back and forth in search of any movement. One had to be a sensor. Naruto stirred, and as silently as she could she placed a hand over his mouth, startling him. The child looked up to her and saw her place a finger to her lips, urging him to remain silent. She leaned into him, her mouth a mere inch from the shell of his ear. "Stay here. Don't make a sound no matter what happens, okay?" He nodded, his eyes burning with determination, before being replaced by worry. "Mom, what are you going to do?" "Lead them away from you." She smiled a reassuring smile, leaned against the bark and took a deep breath. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. She needed to get them away from him. Picturing an image of herself with Naruto holding onto her back, she began going through a set of hand signs, exerting the bare minimum of chakra. "Hange no jutsu," she whispered, at the same time rummaging through her vest and pulling out a pair of smoke bombs to mask the technique. She threw them into the clearing, where they exploded in massive puffs of white smoke. At the same time she was encompassed by a smaller explosion as the transformation took effect. Looking over to Naruto, the Nibi Jinchuriki smiled in reassurance and rushed into the clearing. The Kumonin saw the smoke bombs and scattered to the treetops just as they exploded. The movement made the sensor lose concentration and not sense the slight spike of Yugito's chakra as she transformed. So when she exploded from the smoke, taking off into the forest, they guessed she was making a run for it with the child and pursued. She jumped from branch to branch at breakneck speeds, feeling the 3 chakra signatures of the hunters right behind her. Her plan was working. Now all she needed was to lose them. A nuke ninja she may be, but the idea of killing fellow cloud ninja distressed her, even if it was for Naruto's sake. They didn't seem to share her opinion. A handful of shuriken flew down from the canopy, shredding the branch she had just hopped onto. Gritting her teeth she jumped and twirled in midair, missing the throwing stars by millimeters before righting herself and landing on another branch. Turning, she was forced to duck as a kunai sword passed her, cutting her cheek and sending a short jolt through her body, the metallic weapon coated with lightning chakra. Breathing a curse, she reached for her own kunai holster, and pulled out 3 of the knives. She concentrating her main element into the weapon, she watched as a coating of yellow energy encompassed them. With a short breath she fell back off the branch towards the ground, her arm blurred as she threw the knives, forcing her pursuers to break formation and scatter to avoid them. Calmly she performed a half-backward somersault in mid-air, landing on the forest floor in a crouch and breaking into a run again, ignoring the blood which poured down her cheek. 2 ninja hit the ground behind her and gave chase, both going over hand seals in a blur in preparation for some kind of synchronized attack. Doton, Doryu Taiga. The once hard soil at her feet turned into slick mud. Before Yugito could react, she had sunk to her ankles and fallen face first to the ground. Gritting her teeth she tried to get free, but not before the second ninja finished his set of seals and, skidding to a halt, slammed his hands into the ground. "Sorry Yugito-san, council's orders." Doton, Doryuso. Spikes of rock pierced up from the ground at blurring speed, impaling through the woman's abdomen in an explosion of blood. She screamed in agony, making the 2 ninja flinch. They knew that a wound like that wouldn't kill her. The Nibi's chakra could heal such an injury, didn't make it any easier to watch though. Then they watched in shock and realization as the body began to melt, turning brown before seemingly losing form and imploding in a mass of mud. They were both silent, then breathed curses and spun around, making a beeline for the clearing they had begun pursuit from. "A mud clone," one growled through gritted teeth. "Yeah," the other replied, the mirth in his voice apparent. "She pulled a fast one on us." Kumogakure no Sato. 6 days ago. The knock on the door snapped her out of her sleep. She came awake with a start, before looking bleary-eyed at her door. She waited a moment, wondering if it was her imagination playing tricks on her, then another set of banging knocks. Wiping the gum from her eyes she stood, walked over to the front door and opened it. Any residual sleep left her when she stared into the white porcelain mask of an Anbu operative. The owl-like facade stared back at her unflinchingly, the hazel eyes of the ninja looking her form up and down. She had changed her attire from her shinobi gear to a baggy gray, short-sleeved shirt and a pair of tight dark blue jeans. She was barefoot and had released her locks from the braid, letting the mane of blonde hair flow past her shoulders to the small of her back. "Ni Yugito, by order of the Council of Lightning, you are hereby relieved as guardian to the QB host, Uzumaki Naruto." He spoke in a deep voice which left no room for argument, before trying to push past her. "On whose authority?" she asked, unmoving. "The Anbu frowned by authority of the Council of Lightning." "I answer only to the Raikage," she replied coldly. "As do you." "You think I enjoy being their lapdog, Captain?" The man spat in annoyance. "If I had my way I would tell them to shove this order up their asses, but I can't." Now stand aside." "Not a chance," she said, standing doggedly in place, ready to use her position as a captain in the Anbu Corps to her advantage. "I'm your superior boy, and I think I deserve to at least take him there myself instead of allowing him to be lead off by a bunch of complete strangers." The Anbu looked to his associate. "Sakamoto isn't going to like this." Yugito's growl was feral, making the two elites flinch. "Either you go against Sakamoto with these jokes for orders and get lightly reprimanded, or you go against me and get a broken nose and a demotion. Your call, boy." The Anbu hesitated for a moment. Before his face fell. "You have 1 hour to report him to headquarters to begin his training." "We'll be there," she snarled before slamming the door shut in their faces with a resounding thwack. With a cry of anger she leaned against the wall, sliding down the smooth surface to sit on the floor, her eyes a mass of conflicting emotions. Damn him, he had always wanted a chance to take a Jinchuriki and bend it to his will. The bastard tried to get Killer B, then when that failed he tried to get me. Now he's going to get Naruto, and Raikage-sama can't do a damn thing about it. She couldn't believe how blind the council was to the mad scientist. The man had wanted to get his hands on a Jinchuriki for years. This full conditioning was more than just bringing back an old training method. He wanted to make Naruto his weapon, his trump card against the enemies of Kumogakure and, possibly against his political opponents as well. "Mom," she looked up to see him, dressed in a simple cream-colored shirt and baggy dark orange pants, looking down at her form with a worried expression. "What's wrong?" She took a shuddering breath, and he knew. She didn't know how, but saw the realization in his eyes. His face fell, a small smile forming. It was a fake smile, but that was how he was, always hiding his emotions behind a mask of cheer so as not to worry her. By now she could tell the difference between his genuine and false expressions as if they were the sun and the moon. "Don't worry about it," he said, pointing his thumb to his chest. "I'll ace this training and become as strong as they need me to be." She felt a pang in her heart, and it hurt. They had packed what he needed and walked down to the entrance to the underground Anbu headquarters together. She fully dressed in her Anbu uniform, black pants and jacket, dark gray flak vest worn over the clothing, hair redone in that same braid, covered by a white cloth, and her own Anbu mask, the visage of a cat with blue whisker markings etched onto the cheeks. Every Anbu and ninja above the rank of Chunin knew her mask and boat as she passed them by. She gave them no attention. Almond eyes settled on the spiky blonde hair of her charge, no, her son, as he walked through the streets of the village hidden in the clouds. The people gave them a wide berth. They didn't hate the boy, but they feared him for the creature he had sealed within him. What ignorant fools they all were. Finally they came to the entrance to the Anbu headquarters. A simple single-story office building nestled in the heart of Kumogakure. Outside it looked like nothing special. That was because this was only the administrative branch of the hand-picked elite. They walked through the reception to a large set of iron double doors, a glass control panel embedded on the wall beside it. Without hesitation she pressed her palm against the screen, and watched as a blue line of light flashes over her hand, taking fingerprints and running it through the database. After a moment the huge doors opened, revealing a platform of steel, a small control panel standing on a pulpit in its center. They both entered, the doors closing behind them, and the Azure Cat of Kumogakure walked onto the platform, Naruto close behind. She stood over the control panel, reached out with a hand and pushed the button with the number 9 etched on it. The elevator shuddered as it came to life, and began to descend to the shadowy depths of the Anbu headquarters. This was the central hub of the Raikage's elite guard. Here, underneath the city streets of Kumogakure no Sato, was what many called home. The place was a huge complex, shaped like a beehive, consisting of 20 levels. It held living quarters, sparring chambers, laboratories, a bunker reserved for Kumogakure's elite if the village was ever invaded. It held torture chambers, weapon stores, and a prison which was considered beyond maximum security, reserved for the deadliest of the Cloud Village's enemies. And this bleak place was where Naruto would spend the next few years of his life, training with no light, no warmth, no compassion to become the ultimate soulless weapon for the village. She stopped herself from clutching her chest, for the pain in her heart was immense. As the lift continued to descend she came down to a knee so that she was face to face with him, removing her mask and attaching it to her belt before she stared into his brilliant sapphire eyes. "You have everything right?" He nodded. "Don't let him push you around, Naruto. Don't let him do anything you don't like nor want. You got me?" He nodded again. She was about to speak, then stopped, tried again and failed again. Finally her face fell, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Look at me. The child I care for like a son is about to go into the lion's den and I don't know what to say." She felt her eyes glisten, but stubbornly refused to let them fall. The old persona as the ice cat coming into play for a moment. Tightly she shut her eyes and willed for the tears to stop. A hand was on her shoulder, startling her. She glanced up and saw him look at her with a genuine smile. "I know you're not my real mom," he said, "but you've been more of a mother to me than anyone else ever has. I was all alone in Konoha. I was hated, feared, and people even tried to kill me. You took me away from that. You gave me a home, a family, people who cared about me. You gave my life meaning." He seemed conflicted, scared and uncertain as he spoke the next few words. "I know this seems selfish, but can I still call you Mom? You know, if we ever met again?" The tears flowed, and without a moment's hesitation she put her arms around him and dragged him into an embrace, shutting her eyes tightly as she cried, "Yes, I would like that, Naruto. I would like that so much." He gripped the fabric of her underjacket, burying his face into the crook of her neck. For a while the two were frozen like that, mother and son holding each other. But like a kick to the teeth, the elevator came to a stop with a colossal jolt. The doors opened to reveal the dark, dimly lit corridor of the 18th floor. Rising to her feet, wiping away her tears and placing her Nico mask back on her face, she turned to Naruto and put a comforting hand on his shoulder. He looked up to her and smiled before the two stepped into the dark abyss. Kumogakure no Sato. 3 days ago. 3 days. 3 long days. 3 days since Naruto disappeared into the dark depths of the Yonbu headquarters. She stood on the precipice of the bedroom which was once his, looking at the made bed, the bookshelf full of scrolls, the desk, even his small rack of training equipment under the small window. She could have sworn she was going crazy, for she saw a transparent specter of him sitting on the desk, lying on the bed reading a scroll, looking out the window, flashing that silly grin when he had mastered a jutsu or finished a difficult set of equations. "There has to be something you can do?" She had tried to speak to the Raikage, get him to call for a revote, but it was all in vain. 6 months, she would have to wait 6 months before he could try to overturn the decision. Those 6 months could be 6 months too late. She hadn't heard from him since he vanished. The kid was strong-willed, able to survive the worst someone could throw at him. But what awaited him in that place was worse than the worst. The documents off the full conditioning had been made available to her, and what she read had physically made her shudder. Electrocution, submerged in ice water, burned with pokers, put through hours of beatings and verbal abuse, training in advanced killing techniques from the get-go, experimentation with the seal. They would force him to submit, continue beating him down again and again until he broke. She came to a decision, and strode from the room without a moment's thought, entering her own bedroom and walking across the timber floor to a chest beside her open window. She opened it without a thought, looking down at her black jacket and baggy pants, the yellow symbols of cloud and lightning etched onto the upper arms and thighs, iron, elbow-length gauntlets with storing seals. Her dark gray jonin vest folded over the clothes, the symbol for the cloud with an etched symbol for the two-tailed cat in the background of the village symbol engraved into her right breast satchel. Her Anbu mask over the whole thing, looking at her with those hollow, empty slits for eyes. Nestled on the other side of the chest were her weapons. This included 2 leg weapon holsters, each holding an assortment of kunai, shuriken, 20 meters of steel wire and paper bombs. Beside that was a mid-length katana sheathed in a dark blue sheath, a circular guard, blue wrappings covering the hilt. She took off her normal clothes, putting on her black pants and jacket, followed by her flak vest and sandals. She sat on the bed, tying her elbow-length gauntlets to her arms, her holsters to her upper legs and her sword to her back. Finally she put her cat mask over her face and looked over the landscape of her home, the only place she really knew during her 20 years. "Bye," she whispered before turning and leaving her bedroom. She walked through the living room and opened her door to the first floor of her 2-story apartment block. Only to be met with her sister, leaning against the railing, arms folded, staring at her. Ignoring her, she walked past her towards the stairs. "You're going, aren't you?" She stopped, but did not turn around. "I love Naruto too, but think about it. He wouldn't want you to do this." "How else am I going to get him out of there?" Yugito asked, turning her head for a side glance at her younger sister. "Yugito Wanijin," Samui whispered pleadingly, "if you do this then you will be labeled as a missing nin, Isama will not be able to defend you. You'll play right into that bastard's hands and you'll be in that cell beside Naruto. Do you think he would want that?" "I won't let him become a monster," the elder said, reaching into her vest and pulling out a small scroll from one of her abdomen satchels. She walked to her little sister and handed it to her. "Give this to the Raikage when this is all said and done. It will expunge you and Kirabai from any wrongdoing." Samui hugged herself, looking at her elder sister pleadingly. "Sis, please don't." She smiled behind her mask. "Goodbye, Samui." Before her sister could try to stop her, Yugito moved. Her attack was a blur, her hand chopping the nerves on her sister's neck. Samui's eyes bulged before closing. She fell into her sister's arms, carrying her into her apartment and setting her on her living room couch. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Looking back at her little sister one last time, she closed her apartment door and vanished in a flash. "Sorry." She ran across the rooftops, Naruto slung to her back. The boy was unconscious and sickly pale, obviously been put through extensive sessions of his training. She gritted her teeth at the word. Was this what could have happened to her and Killer Bee? There was a flash of bluish light and she looked up, seeing the massive spires which were the electric pylons of Kumogakure. Each towering behemoth placed on one of the four corners of the inner defensive wall, using the common lightning storms to supply the village with electricity for its basic essentials. One good storm could keep the village powered for a month. She knew she had a long journey. The village was strategically placed on top of a plateau, the only path down being a winding road along the sheer cliffs. This made it difficult for an invading army to advance upon the shinobi village, and had saved them several times in the past. The huge walls of rock cordoning the village off were easily the size of Konohas and much tougher, considering they were made and carved from solid rock. Finally she reached the last building, seeing the huge vertical structure of the outer defensive wall of her village stretch up to the heavens. She stopped, feeling a sense of déjà vu. This reminded her so much of 4 years ago when she was scaling the walls of Kumogakure with this child on her back. Now she was doing the same thing again, only this time it was in her home village. Concentrating chakra into the soles of her feet, she jumped, landing on the wall and effortlessly running up the vertical structure. She reached the top, seeing an empty corridor which would have been filled with long-range specialists during a siege or a time of war. She looked back upon her home, her eyes, hidden behind her mask, confining every contour of the rocky structures to memory. Suddenly a voice resounded from the darkness, going somewhere. "Yugito?" She turned, and her heart literally jumped up to her throat. There stood the Raikage, fully dressed in his robes of office, looking upon her with eyes as hard as diamonds. She was no match for him, no matter the situation. But something changed. He looked upon her, diamond-hard eyes softening before stepping aside. She hesitated, thinking for a moment that it was a trick. Then she walked across the corridor between the village and the outside world. She gave the Raikage one last glance. He stood with his head bowed, eyes closed as if in penance. In 6 hours he spoke, his voice saddened. "I won't be able to keep it a secret much longer. I will be forced to list you as a nukenin, and send a hunter team after you." He looked into her eyes, conflicted as to what to say next, then he closed his eyes and bowed his head again. "Go." She hopped up to the battlements, looking down at the seemingly bottomless abyss in front of her. But something in her stopped. She turned, locking eyes with the Raikage. "Sorry," she whispered, before she leaned back and fell from the battlements. For a moment the leader of Kumogakure no Sato looked down at the ground, then a pensive smile appeared on the giant man's lips. "What do you have to be sorry for? Stupid blonde." Hi no Kuni, present day. The mud clone had bought her a few moments, but that was all. Her pursuers were definitely Jonin-level ninja. They had left one of their number behind to make sure her little stunt wasn't a trick. He had followed her the entire time, spiking his chakra subtly every now and then to keep his comrades on track. She continued to run, changing direction every now and then to try and lose her pursuer. But to no avail. He was a skilled tracker, and had seen through every move she made to elude him. Now he had met up with his two compatriots, and they were chasing after her. There was one advantage: they would not attack for fear of hurting Naruto, and taking the wrath of both the chief scientist of the Science and Research Bureau and the Raikage. The cage would have probably beaten them to a bloody pulp for wounding Yugito so badly in the first place. But she was running out of options. She would not draw upon the power of the Nibi against her fellow ninja. They knew this, and were using it to their advantage. As far as they were concerned, she was a normal A-class nuke nin whom the village wanted brought back alive, along with her charge. The Nibi and the QB were too important to the village for them to just kill the hosts. Suddenly the dense undergrowth gave way to a clearing, or to be more precise a dirt road. She stumbled, expecting more foliage and putting too much weight into her movements, before righting herself again. She skidded to a halt, looked at the forest beyond and prepared to burst into motion again. Hey, a voice, middle-aged and deadly serious, came to her exhausted hearing. "What are you doing here? This is Hi no Kuni." She turned to see a tall man, in his late 40s with a long messy mane of pure white hair. Skin was tanned by the climate, Eyes a dark obsidian with long thin reed markings running from the bottom of his eyes to his jaw. A strange hatayite was attached to his forehead, two small stubby-looking horns with a strange symbol she didn't recognize engraved into the metal. He wore a pair of green robes with a mesh shirt underneath, a red jacket, large scroll tied to the small of his back and a pair of ridiculous-looking sandals. Then she recognized him, and paled. He was in her bingo book, one of the most dangerous loyal ninja to Kumogakure no Sato. Secretly he had been branded with a retreat on site order to anyone below high A class. Jiraiya. Chapter 2. Dubious Circumstances. Borderlands of High no Kuni. She stood, staring into the eyes of one of the most powerful ninja on the continent. He was a legend from the Second Shinobi World War. A ninja who had fought against the best in the world, called a Sannin, a legendary ninja by Hanzo the Salamander, leader of Kumogakure and arguably the greatest ninja of his generation. The spy master of Kumogakure no Sato, whose spy network was considered one of the best in the world, sage of the toads and an unparalleled master of the art of sealing. Jiraiya stared right back, his mind taking in every feature and contour of his surprise guest's form. He knew her from somewhere, but couldn't remember where. Then he remembered. Very few spy masters knew every detail about the hosts of the Bijou, the tailed beasts of legend. She was slightly older than her picture, but he knew exactly who she was. Yugito ni, Jonin and Anbu captain of Kumogakure no Sato, low S-class ninja and Jinchuriki to the Nibi no Bakoneko, one of the village hidden in the cloud's ultimate weapons. Finding this information out was no small feat. To the rest of the world she was just a talented young ninja. Her condition was an S-class secret, and he lost quite a few spies just confirming it. Her head snapped back, and she took off in a dead run into the forest. He was about to move to intercept, but stopped when he saw something clinging to her back, and it was not a backpack. It was a child, maybe 8 years old, with spiked dark blonde hair. The Nibi container had a kid? Impossible, she was far too young. Then he saw the kid's face, only for a moment, but he made out at least 3 whisker-like markings on his cheek, tan skin and brilliant sapphire eyes. "I know that kid," he whispered under his breath, his brain rattling through a mass of information to try and remember. Then he remembered. It had been 5 years ago. He had returned to Konoha to foil an assassination attempt on his deceased student's son. He had watched him from afar, waiting for the assassins to make their move. "Naruto," he whispered. A gust of wind blew by him, swaying his long messy white hair. Jiraiya was about to pursue when he heard the tapping of sandals on bark. Looking up he saw another 3 silhouettes, forms darkened by the positioning of the sun. They flew over him and disappeared into the forest, the same direction where that woman and Naruto had gone. The 3 disappeared into the forest canopy. It was obvious by their formation and speed that they were pursuing the 2. There was a series of sudden thuds, and looking down the toad sage saw a small line of kunai dug into the earth at his feet, each one possessing the fluttering form of an already lit paper bomb. "Oh shit!" Jiraiya cursed audibly, jumping back just as the line of bombs exploded in a mass of flame and dirt. Caught in the aftermath he was thrown into the forest, slamming into and snapping the thin trunk of a tree. With a groan the 46-year-old staggered to his feet, hand patting a sore back. "All right," he growled, reaching up to pat the twigs and leaves from his mane of hair. "If that's how you want to play." He took a breath, concentrated his chakra to the soles of his feet and exploded into motion, giving chase to the 2 groups. It had been 4 years since that incident, 4 years since he heard that his godson had been kidnapped by Kumonin. For the first 4 years of that boy's life he had been working in the shadows, fully utilizing his spy network to hunt down and nullify any and all threats against him, whether they be external or internal. Sadly he missed one, and a week after the incident he had received word from his old sensei, telling him that Naruto had been captured by Kumonin, most likely collateral after their failed attempt to kidnap the heir of the Hyuga clan. He and his sensei had tried to mount a rescue attempt, but they were impeded by the elders of the Council of Fire. Tensions between the 2 villages escalated, and all attempts at a rescue mission ceased. Even his sensei Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sundaime Hokage, had been forced to give up any hope on getting Naruto back. The entire affair had hurt the old man, and he had blamed himself for the boy's loss. But now he had a chance to make it all right. He didn't know the full situation, but one thing was clear as day to him. Naruto had to be taken back. This time he would not fail the kid, he would be there to protect him, keep him safe and help him become a young man his mother and father would be proud of. He jumped from branch to branch, giving pursuit to the 3 ninja. The sun was no longer obstructing his vision. He could tell by the color of their armored suits and flak vests that they were ninja from Kumo, and they were pursuing the woman. An explosion sounded off ahead of him, a cloud of white smoke rising in the distance. He knew there was a battle kicking off, Kumo Nin versus Kumo Nin right in the Land of Fire's borders. The political ramifications for this would be immense. War had been declared over much less in the history of the elemental nations. Ahead of him Yugito held 3 more kunai in her hands, just finishing tying exploding tags to each one. As she jumped she spun, throwing the 3 knives in different directions. She heard them stab into the surrounding trees, waited a couple of seconds and bringing her hands together in a basic sign shouted Kai. The paper bombs caught fire, burned out and exploded, sending shards of wood and debris at the Kumo Jonin. The Nibi container cast a brief glance back, only to see the 3 come through the smoke with the odd cut or scrape, but otherwise unharmed. Gritting her teeth she continued to jump from branch to branch. This was not good. She was down to 3 kunai, 6 shuriken and 20 meters of wire. At the rate she was using them soon all she would have left was her katana, and Yugito did not want to get into a close-range fight with these guys. Not with Naruto hanging onto her for dear life. Then there was the man she had run into on the dirt road. Jiraiya of the Sannin would definitely report this chance encounter to Konoha, and war had been declared over considerably less. A skirmish taking place between foreign ninja in their territory would not be looked upon favorably. All she wanted was to get Naruto out of Kumo, and now she may have inadvertently caused another war like the one 4 years ago. Mom! His voice roused her from her dangerous thoughts, and not a moment too soon. She landed on a branch, crouched and using the momentum of her bent knees jumped and spun. Watching as a wave of shuriken swished by, one grazed her cheek, sending blood dripping to the bark. Mom! Naruto called worriedly, his hands gripping onto her jacket. You're bleeding. It's nothing, she replied reassuringly, ignoring the warm liquid which flowed down her cheek. The shuriken bit deeper than she thought. I'm fine. A kunai shot into her hand from her wrist holster, and she held it up defensively, cat-like eyes scanning the surrounding area as 3 dark silhouettes appeared all around her, surrounding them and blocking off all escape routes. With her free hand she reached to the katana, sheathed to a scabbard at the small of her back, and drew it with blurring speed. Yugito Ni the leader spoke in a threatening manner, his face hidden behind a swallow mask. Surrender and hand the boy over. She smiled menacingly and condemned him to that hell. Not a chance. Be reasonable, another piped up, this one wearing an eagle's mask. If you surrender maybe Raikage-sama will spare you. She snorted at that. The Raikage wouldn't be able to do a thing. She was beyond his protection now. Lao decreed that anyone who committed such crimes against the council was to be labeled a nuke nin with a hunt down and kill order attached. If she was taken alive then she would be hauled back to Anbu headquarters, and have the Nibi forcefully removed from her body. The stress from such forceful extractions was always enough to kill the host, and another baby girl would be taken from her family and turned into a weapon. That was what happened to her predecessor. You know that I'm beyond his help, she said grimly. Penalty for my crime is death. Can't have any rebellious weapons after all. The one behind her threw a salvo of shuriken, forcing her to skip back and perform a backward somersault, falling from the branch and landing on the forest floor. She steadied herself into a crouch and looked up just in time to see the sparrow finish a set of hand signs. He hit the ground in a crouch, hands resting on the earth. Doten, Doru Taiga. She jumped high, looking down long enough to see the ground where she once stood turned to slippery muck. The same jutsu again meant they were trying to take her alive. Her status as host to one of their tailed beasts made her too much of a commodity to just kill. They wanted to cat, and the fox. Mom, behind you, Naruto shouted quickly, and she turned to see a small sickle flying towards her, a chain attached to its butt, whose other side was wrapped around Eagle's right hand. She pivoted her body in midair, watching the miniature war scythe pass by, the tip cutting through her clothes and nicking her abdomen. Eagle gave the chain a yank, and the sickle flew back at her. In response she spun, watching with bated breath as the weapon passed by back to its owner. A shadow fell above her and turning she came face to face with the white porcelain mask of her third opponent. This one was that of a crow. She acted on instinct, her body going on autopilot. She stabbed her kunai through his abdomen. Crow grunted in pain before his form was encompassed with yellow light, crackling and sparking with barely contained power. Yugito cursed under her breath as the lightning clone exploded, tearing through her chest and abdomen, throwing her and Naruto to the forest floor below. On instinct she spun to protect the child hanging onto her back, and faced the ground as it hurriedly rose up to meet them. She raised her hands to protect herself, and pain exploded through her as she slammed onto the ground. Ribs cracked, couldn't move her right hand, most likely broken. The lightning had burned through her clothes, her Jonin vest protecting her from the worst, but her abdomen, upper thighs and shoulders were badly burned. The pain was unbearable, even if the Nibi could heal it. All that was needed was 5 minutes, but the two-tailed monster cat was not the nine-tailed demon fox, and while she could heal burns, cuts, scraps and many a fatal injury, she could not mend bones, not without considerable effort. Her head spun, eyes grew heavy. She couldn't hear Naruto calling out her name, but she could see his youthful face as he pushed her onto her back. He was crying, oceanic orbs laced with worry and panic. Her vision blurred as she watched the ninja jump down from the treetops and slowly approach her. "Don't you think that was a little much?" Eagle asked. "Meh, she's a Jinchuriki. She can take it," Crow replied uncaringly. "Besides, she's a Nukenin now." But she was holding back against a swallow piped up. "If she really wanted to hurt us, she would have used something more than explosive," tagged Kunai. "It's her loss," Crow said flippantly. "We can't afford to be merciful. The village needs the Nibi and the Kyubi to stay at the top of the food chain, and she's just lost her dependability." They stood over both her and Naruto now, expressionless masks bearing down on her. She tried to move, tried to get the kid behind her, but a boot slammed forcefully against her chest. Yugito hacked up blood and gasped in pain as she felt a few more ribs crack under the pressure. "Don't move. Any wrong moves and we will kill you." His eyes radiated disgust and hate upon her as he kicked her in the abdomen. "Stupid bitch, couldn't let it go, could you?" "Mom." "Shut up," Crow growled, backhanding Naruto and sending him landing on the ground hard. "What does a monster like you need with a mother anyway? I suppose monsters are drawn to monsters, huh?" "Come on, man, knock it off," Eagle warned, but his caution fell on deaf ears. "Might as well stop her from attempting an escape," the Onbu with the crow mask growled, drawing his katana and stepping to her. "Should I cut off one leg or two?" Any threatening move he made towards her was halted by a sudden explosion of white smoke. Surprised by the suddenness of the attack, the three acted on instinct and jumped away, their forms exploding through the smoke as they went and landing on a few nearby branches. There was a clack of sandals on the hard ground, a repeated clacking of sandals on the ground. The smoke cleared and a voice, loud and boisterous, resounded through the forests. "I am the hermit of Mount Mayuboku, the wise and immortal spirit." "That's right, it is I. The Toad Mountain Sage." The smoke cleared completely and the three Jonin's eyes widened at who they saw, standing on one foot, one hand sweeping forward while the other swept back, head partially hidden by a massive mane of messy white hair. "Jiraiya?" He slipped on a patch of slick mud, landing on his back with a painful thud. "Oh, not what I had in mind." Naruto could only stare at the fallen form, flopping like a guppy as he tried to right himself. He seemed to give up, then reeling his legs back flipped to his feet, a great resounding clacking going through the forest as his sandals hit solid earth. The three ninja did not seem impressed. The kid was looking at him like he was an idiot. "Out of the way, old man," Crow snarled. "This doesn't concern you." The Toad Sage looked up at the ninja, and he did not look impressed. "Kumonin, fighting amongst themselves in the territory of the Land of Fire. Oh, I think this concerns me a great deal." He looked at Naruto for a moment, a small smile on his face. "Besides, if the kid is who I think he is, then it's only natural that I step in." He made a set of hand signs with blurring speed, finishing with a tiger seal and a smirk. "Welcome to the Land of Fire, Katen, Enden." He puffed out his chest as he inhaled the surrounding hair, which deflated as he exhaled, spitting out a continuous stream of scarlet flame towards the cloud nin. They scattered, the fire hitting the branch and burning right through. Both Swallow and Eagle landed on the ground, skidding to a halt. A shadow fell on them and they turned to see the Toad Sage bearing down on them, each hand crackling with blue power as two balls of swirling azure formed. His expression deadly serious, he slammed the balls of power into their chests with a colossal roar of the technique's name, Tsuin Rasengan. Both men were struck, their bodies seemingly folding in on themselves before they were thrown back with incredible force, thrown through the air and smashing into the earth, leaving trails of disheveled dirt in their wake. Crow was above him as the Sannin landed, his own hands going through a set of hand signs. He finished with the tiger. "You're not the only one who can use fire. Release, old man. Katen, Gokaku no Jutsu." He inhaled air, and using a ring made of his middle and index fingers blew out a large ball of crimson fire. The fireball fell upon Jiraiya, exploding the moment it hit the ground. Crow landed on the ground, falling into a crouch and looking at the destruction he had wrought. The ball dissipated, showing a crater of charred earth. The Sannin was nowhere to be found. "Nice try, son," a voice stated from behind him, "but it's obvious you can't tell the difference between a cage bunshine and the real deal." Crow turned to be met with a fist, slamming into his face with bone-crunching force. He heard rather than felt his nose shatter under the strike before he was lifted into the air and thrown against an unyielding tree stump. Slumping to the ground, nursing his nose, the man looked up to see the toad sage approach. "I'm not going to kill you or your little friend's kid. Instead I'll send you back to Kumogakure with a little warning. Don't ever enter our land again unless you want to spark another war, and believe me, we have a lot of incentive thanks to that little stunt you pulled 4 years ago." He stood before him, an unmovable object. "Oh, the kid and his friend there are now under my protection. You can come after us if you like, but I might not be so merciful next time." He reeled back his fist, the palm coated with chakra, and without warning slammed it into Crow's face, breaking his jaw and knocking him unconscious. Taking a deep breath, the seal master turned and walked back to the kid and his unconscious mother. Watching as the young blonde watched him wearily, sitting on his knees between the blonde-haired woman and him. Jiraiya shook his head in bemusement, amazed at how alike the kid was to his father on looks. Take away the whisker markings on his cheeks and he would have become a carbon copy. He reached out with his hand, and the kid flinched like he was about to be struck. That saddened him, but it didn't stop him from ruffling the boy's hair. The child opened his eyes and looked up at him, curiosity in his gaze. "You all right, kid? Not hurt anywhere?" "I'm fine," he stuttered, a little unnerved by the massive man before him. "But Mom, I think she's hurt really bad." "Let's take a look then," Jiraiya replied, coming down to a knee to check on the wounds of one Yugito knee. He guessed she was between 18 and 22 years of age, and the rumors about her beauty were hardly exaggerated. Full lips, cream-colored skin, long blonde hair tied in a braid of white cloth, nice bust, curves in all the right places. She would give any girl in Konoha a run for their money in the looks department, more than a worthy peaking prize for his research too, in his opinion. If she recovered, the woman would definitely be in his next book, under an alias of course. He checked her wounds and shivered. Second-degree burns along the shoulders, thighs, and abdomen. Her clothes around these areas were smoldering ruins, but it looked like the Jonin vest she wore protected her from the worst of it. A deep cut ran along her cheek, but as he watched, the wound sealed with a sudden puff of steam. The burn marks were receding as well, albeit slowly. The tales he heard about a Jinchuriki's healing abilities weren't exaggerated. But as he checked her pulse and injuries, using what little medical expertise he had, he felt cracked and broken ribs, guessed she had a concussion and her right arm was bent at a funny angle. What was worse was that they weren't healing. She needed a hospital. Gently he put his arms around her and lifted her off the ground, grimacing when he heard a pained moan escape her lips. Naruto looked on worriedly, and with a sigh Jiraiya gently put the girl down. There was no way of moving her in her condition, not without making the injuries worse. He needed another way to move her, but how? Then it hit him. Gingerly he sat down cross-legged on the ground, his hand reaching into his robe, producing an empty sealing scroll. The toad sage pulled off the seal and opened it, revealing an intricate set of runes, all surrounding a circle of empty paper. "What are you going to do?" He looked over at the young blonde. "Her wounds aren't bad, but I can't move her normally. So I'm going to seal her into this scroll until we get to a hospital." "She'll be all right, right?" He smiled slightly. "Yeah, she's going to be all right." He made a couple of hand signs, slamming his hand on top of the empty scroll, and watched as the Nibi Jinchuriki disappeared in a puff of white smoke. The kanji symbol for human appeared on the empty space, and in one smooth motion he rolled up the scroll, reattached the seal and deposited it back into his coat. But Jiraiya wasn't done yet. Biting his thumb with enough pressure to draw blood, he imprinted the red liquid on the fingertips of his right hand and made the hand seals for boar, dog, bird, monkey and ram. He crouched, slamming his hand into the earth, summoning runes, marking themselves on the rocky surface before another explosion of white smoke. It cleared, revealing a small toad wearing a blue jacket, its skin yellow with dark orange markings around his eyes and along his stomach. The small omnivore looked up at the toad sage, and raised a webbed hand in greeting. "Yo Jiraiya, what's happening, dude?" "Agamajiro," the old man returned with a wave of his own. "I need you to take a message to the Sun Daime for me." The small creature looked up. "Do I get some candy?" Jiraiya chuckled. Yes. The old man has a small supply hidden in the second drawer of his desk." "Good enough for me," Gamajiro replied. "So what's the message?" "Tell the old man that I found him," the mountain toad sage explained, and at the small toad's questioning look he reiterated, "He'll understand what I mean." The toad thought about it for a moment, then shrugged dismissively. "Sure, whatever." "Wow, that is so cool." Both sage and summon turned to see the 8-year-old blonde on all fours staring at the small toad in wonder. "It's a frog, and it talks." "Frog?" Gamajiro repeated the word for a moment, looking incredulously at the blonde. "I'm not a frog, I'm a toad." Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. "Is there a difference?" "Hokage's office, Kumogakure no Sato. Sarutobi Hiruzen, son Daime Hokage of Kumogakure no Sato, patriarch to the prestigious Sarutobi clan, peered through clasped hands at the door leading out of his office, mind reeling over the information relayed to him. His home was on the verge of the greatest internal conflict since the founding of the village nearly 80 years ago. Evidence had recently been placed before him that the Uchiha clan was planning on performing a coup d'état of the village council. This was worrying news as the clan was one of the two founders of the village. They were the recipients of the infamous and legendary Dujutsu Kekkei Genkai known as the Sharingan, and held a lot of sway with certain elements of the ninja and civilian populations. To make matters worse, any chance of trying to mediate the situation was being cannibalized by his former rival and fellow village elder Danzo, who was even now assembling his own division of Anbu, the Root, in preparation to meet the Uchiha head-on. The results would be a bloody and costly struggle which would weaken the village hidden in the leaves, leaving them open to invasion from one of the other shinobi nations. With a sigh, the legendary professor leaned back in his chair, absently reaching into his top desk drawer for his pipe and matches. He lit the pipe, puffed out a mouthful of tobacco smoke and looked up to the portraits of his predecessors and supposed successor. Senju Hashirama, the Shodai Hokage and founder of Konoha, his own sensei and younger brother to the Shodai Senju Tobirama, the Nidaime, and finally his successor, the Ondaime Hokage Namikaze Minato. He looked at the portrait of the Ondaime with a solemn expression, feeling a familiar sense of guilt well up within him. The man had given up his own life to defeat and seal the Kyuubi no Yoko, and his one dying wish was that the host to the demon, his own son, be seen as a hero. A sad chuckle escaped the old man's lips. He had tried. Instilled laws that Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki be hidden from those his age. That any mention of the demon was to be punished severely. He had tried, but his successor's dying wish had not been fulfilled. Many of the civilian villagers had hated the boy, seeing him as the demon. Some even going far enough to try to kill or assassinate him. The Uchiha had wanted him put to death. His rival Danzo wanted to take the boy and turn him into a mindless weapon. It took everything he had to keep them at bay. Jiraiya's spy network and his own wish to help Naruto had been extremely helpful, and together they had saved him from dozens of assassination attempts. Sadly, one had gotten through, and what was worse was that he didn't even hear about it until a week after the fact. The Hyuga incident had hit the village hard, and the death of the clan head's brother to stop a continuation of hostilities had been very hard to watch. The child's Anbu guards reported that they hadn't seen him at the orphanage. They had scoured the city for him, but found nothing. Hiruzen knew that Kumogakure had something to do with it, and his former apprentice agreed with him. His suspicions proved correct, and he had tried to assemble a strike team to take the boy back. The council, most notably the Uchiha and elders, had put a stop to it, hindering his and Jiraiya's attempts at every turn. They argued that any attempt at such an action would lead to a continuation of hostilities with the Hidden Cloud, something no one wanted. Eventually he was forced to abandon any chance of a rescue. Jiraiya had been furious with his decision, and the two hadn't spoken to each other since. "Yo!" He frowned, looking around for the source of the voice. There was no one else in the room. "Hey Pops." The Sandaime looked around again, his frown firmly in place. Was it the wind? Was his old mind finally playing tricks on him? "Down here." The suddenness of the shout was enough to make the 65-year-old jump in surprise, barely grabbing his smoking pipe before it fell on his lap. With a growl he looked down in surprise, eyes wide to see a small yellow toad, no bigger than his hand, staring back up at him. "Who are you?" The little creature looked insulted. "I'm Gamajiro, and I have a message addressed to you from Jiraiya." "Jiraiya," the old man repeated numbly, forgetting that his student had a contract with these pesky little fellows. Jiraiya the toad confirmed with a groan of annoyance. "So do you want to hear it or not?" He said it was pretty urgent. The Sandaime coughed into his hand. "Yes, go on." "Okay." The yellow amphibian chirped his messages, and I repeat, Dodi found him. Silence reigned as the old man turned the words over in his head, frowning at his student's lack of information. "I found him." What the hell is he talking about? It's obviously something he considers to be obvious, then that must mean. His jaw went slack, and this time the pipe did fall on his lap. What followed was a series of pained cries and colorful curses which sent his Anbu detail running. 1 hour later, Kumogakure no Sato, Konoha Hospital. He never liked hospitals. To him, walking into the reception, seeing the blank white walls, smelling the disinfectant brought back memories of more painful times, when he was either one of the patients in this hospital, visiting fellow ninja ravaged by war, or going in to identify the corpse of a friend. Yes, Sarutobi Hiruzen never visited the hospital unless it was absolutely necessary. His student was waiting for him in the reception, sitting on one of the chairs which flanked the walls, talking in his usual boisterous manner to someone beside him, although who the old man could not say. As he got closer he saw who it was, and a smile spread across his aging lips. It was Naruto. The boy had grown up, and was nearly twice the size he was since the last time he saw him. He had let his hair grow a little, but it was the same mess he remembered. His skin was still tanned, eyes still those unnaturally blue. He looked well fed and cared for. Although when the aging Hokage got closer he saw that the child seemed worried about something, for although he was talking to Jiraiya there was hesitancy in his voice. The Sandaime looked around. There were a couple of nurses at the reception. The odd doctor hurried through the corridor, but other than that it seemed quiet. Obviously they didn't recognize him, to which he was grateful. Jiraiya noticed him then, and with a smile he rose from his place, Naruto following suit, and waved, "Hey old man. Long time." "Yes, 4 years if I'm not mistaken," Sarutobi returned, before setting his sights on the small boy partially hiding behind the Sanin. "Hello Naruto, do you remember me?" The boy seemed to think for a moment, and then he lit up somewhat. "You're the old man who used to come visit me in the orphanage." "Hey brat, mind your manners," Jiraiya barked in slight outrage. "This is the Hokage." The boy seemed to realize his folly, but instead of hastily apologizing he frowned, crossing his arms over his chest. "Ain't he a little old to be the cage?" Hiruzen watched in stunned silence, then he threw his head back and laughed. "Yes Naruto, I am the old man who used to visit you at the orphanage. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage." He then turned to his former pupil, a questioning look on his face. "He looks fine Jiraiya, I don't see why you brought him to the hospital." "I didn't come to the hospital for him," Jiraiya replied, before looking around and leaning in. "I need you to gather a team of medical ninja and a squad of Anbu. Only those you can trust." Sarutobi nodded, his face taking on a serious facade. "For whom?" "A Kumo nin who was traveling with Naruto. She suffered major second-degree burns, cracked ribs, a mild concussion and a broken right arm." At his sensei's frown the Sanin reiterated, "I'm guessing she was the boy's protector, for she was fleeing and fighting the Cloud Ninja in pursuit." The old man's eyes widened for a moment, before narrowing again. Before he could speak Naruto's voice interrupted. "You're talking about Yugito-chan, right?" Both looked down at the blonde, seeing both worry and resolve in his eyes. "You know her Naruto?" The blonde nodded. "She's my mom." "Your mom?" they both intoned with a slight frown. He nodded. "She's not my real mom, but she took care of me while I was in Kumo, and when the council overruled the Raikage to put me through some sort of illegal training, Yugito-chan came to my rescue. She gave up everything she knew to protect me." Both were deep in thought with this information for a moment, before Hiruzen looked up at the ceiling. "Suki, May." Silently 2 figures fell from the rooftops, hitting the floor in a kneeling position, heads bowed. They were Anbu, dressed in full armor with katana sheathed at their backs. Their faces were hidden by the porcelain animal masks of a panther and a wolf. One had long black hair, done up in a ponytail, while the other was the color of chestnut, and shoulder length. "Hi, Hokage-sama," they stated in unison. "Take the boy and get him something to eat, until otherwise you are his protectors." "Hi, Hokage-sama." He looked to Naruto with a reassuring smile. "Go with them and get something to eat, you can trust us." He hesitated, before nodding and letting the 2 women lead him to the hospital cafeteria. When he was out of sight the Sandaime looked up to the rafters again. Taking a puff from his pipe, Yuji and other Anbu silently fell from the rafters, landing silently in a kneeling position, a plain white boar mask covering his face. "Gather Misaki's medical team, fast." The third Anbu nodded before disappearing in a swirl of wind and leaves. "I'm also going to perform a level 5 chakra seal when the medics have finished with her," Jiraiya added when the Anbu left the hospital. The Sandaime frowned. It wasn't unusual for a chakra seal to be placed on a captured foreign ninja, but level 5 was usually used for those of cage level. "That seems a little extreme." The Shanin looked around, as if searching for prying eyes. "I have a suspicion that I know who she is." He frowned at his former pupil's cryptic manner. "Spit it out, Jiraiya." "Not here," the Sanin stated, leading the old man down the hallway to one of several one-bedroom rooms. Once the door slid shut, Jiraiya put his hands together, blurring through hand seals before finishing with the ram seal. To the naked eye there was nothing but a slight sizzle of air, but a bubble of chakra formed around the room, clinging to the walls, doors and windows. The privacy seal complete, Sarutobi took a puff of his pipe and motioned for Jiraiya to continue. "Niyugito, Jonin level ninja of Kumogakure no Sato, and Jinchuriki to the two-tailed monster cat." He narrowed his eyes at the statement. Yes, that would make the use of a level 5 chakra seal very necessary. Does anyone else know? Jiraiya shook his head. Just me, you and the brat. For no, let's keep it that way, the Sun Daime ordered. If the council found out that there are not one, but two possibly hostile Jinchuriki in this village, then they will panic. Naruto isn't hostile. Yes, I know, but will the council? Sarutobi frowned, taking a puff of his pipe, especially in this charged climate. His former student gave him a questioning look. I thought the situation with the Uchiha was smoothing out. Negotiations are failing. That bad, huh? Sarutobi nodded gravely. Danzo and his root aren't helping the situation either. If a compromise cannot be reached soon, then both the Uchiha loyalists and root are going to be fighting each other in the streets. And you will be forced to assemble your own Anbu and Jonin to restore order, leading to a three-way civil war. Sarutobi finished. Jiraiya leaned against the wall, arms folded across his broad chest, head bowed and eyes closed in contemplation. He knew from his spy network in Konoha that it was bad, but to hear it from his sensei's mouth was the final nail in the coffin for him. You can count on me and my network, old man. He nodded with a hum, taking another smoke of his pipe. Thank you, Jiraiya. Who else is supporting you besides your personal Anbu squads? I have the support of the Hyuga, Yamanaka, Nara, Akamiki and the Inuzuka, was his reply. Most of the major clans, Jiraiya said. You definitely have the numbers advantage. The Uchiha have little support in the Jonin or Anbu, Hiruzen explained, but they have considerable influence among the Chunin. How many Chunin? Around 150, Hiruzen muttered. Add that to the Uchiha clan ninja, all of whom possess Sharingan and are all between Chunin to Jonin level ninja. The numbers are around 200. Jiraiya frowned. This has to be the worst time to bring Naruto back. No kidding, Sarutobi agreed. For now we'll keep his and his guardian a secret until this potential disaster is stabilized. Yeah, the Sannin agreed. If either Danzo or Fugaku find out that we have two Jinchuriki in the hospital, then the party could start early. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, followed by a calm feminine voice. Hokage-sama, you called for us? Yes, Misaki-san, Sarutobi replied, nodding to Jiraiya to dispel the privacy jutsu. The door slid open to reveal a fairly young woman. Her striking emerald eyes and smooth features framed by a mane of chocolate-brown locks. Following her were another three shinobi, all Chunin with medical patches attached to their shoulders, right below the leaf and fire symbols. The woman nodded her head. Hokage-sama. The Sun Daime nodded his head before speaking. As of this moment, this is an S-class secret. You are all not allowed to reveal what you see here under severe punishment. Do you understand me? The four looked among each other uncertainly before Misaki spoke. We understand, Hokage-sama. He turned his head to Jiraiya, who took out a small storage scroll from his coat and, taking off the seal, opened the scroll and spread it across the floor. The medics looked on with interest as the seal master released the seal, and watched with equal interest as a young blonde woman appeared through the white smoke. Obviously badly wounded and in need of immediate attention. Then they saw the Kumo headband on her forehead and hesitated. Well, the Sun Daime asked with a frown. Step to it. No one knew where the base of operations for Root was. There was much speculation among the ranks of the Hokage's personal guard and the regular ninja forces, but no one knew where they gathered. The truth was that the Ni had no central base of operations. Deep under the surface of Kumogakures Old Town District, in the oldest sewer systems of the village, was the new temporary headquarters of the secretive branch of Anbu known as Root, and they were assembling in full force, gathering together in a drained-out chamber. Almost 50 elite ninja had gathered from every corner of the Hidden Leaf village, answering the call of their master. The leader in question sat on a tatami mat in the middle of the crevice, outwardly calm and collected. Dressed in a white high-collared robe, a rickety walking stick laid out to his left. The full right side of his body covered in bandages, even across the right side of his face, obviously missing an eye and sporting a stump which was once a right arm. It was obvious the man had been through war. Silence was constant. His soldiers, all kneeling with their heads bowed, did not make a single movement or gesture. They were as still as statues, waiting for his order. Each shinobi had been put through severe mental and physical conditioning, trained to operate at maximum efficiency with no emotion. They were the perfect soldiers. Danzo frowned. He did not like assembling his Root like this, but the current situation with the Uchiha was becoming worse by the moment. The Uchiha were becoming too arrogant for their own good. Their supposed superiority over all other Konoha shinobi was making them a serious liability to the village. If action was not taken soon, then Konoha would be lost. The consequences of open conflict were unacceptable. Civil war would weaken Konoha, and other nations would use the civil strife to their advantage, declaring war and further weakening Hinokuni. Iwa was most likely to take advantage. They and Konoha had been on frosty relationship since the end of the Third Great Shinobi World War, and the Rock Nin would take any chance to weaken their Leaf rivals. What was worse was that Sarutobi's lack of action to counter the Uchiha clan before they made their move. He had tolerated his old rival's softening nature up until now, but his lack of action was near suicidal in the one-eyed elder's mind. Instead of forcing the Uchiha to submit, Hiruzen wanted to negotiate, a useless practice in his eyes. Sure, Fugaku and his clan could capitulate now, but what about next time? He heard movement in the rafters above and watched as an Anbu fell silently from above. The elder not even batting an eyelash as he fell into a kneeling stance, head bowed in silent reverence. Danzo eyed the plain white boar mask and immediately knew him as the operative he had implanted in Sarutobi's Anbu ranks. Report, the Cyclops ordered lightly. The man nodded his head. An hour ago Jiraiya of the Sannin arrived in the Konoha hospital with a small child in tow. That child has been confirmed as Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Yoko. The beginning of the report made Danzo pause. Carefully he put his cup of herb tea to the side. Before giving his subordinate his undivided attention, he asked Hokage-sama for a medical team, one he trusted to treat an unknown female Kumonin, identity unconfirmed. Danzo hesitated for a moment, before nodding his head. Yuji bowed, then like a wraith jumped up to the rafters once again with short bursts of chakra to his feet. All the while his leader was in quiet contemplation. If word got out of this child's return to Konoha, then the Uchiha would perceive it as a threat and act prematurely. They had always been stout opposition to keeping the child alive after the Kyubi attack. But soon an idea sprang into his mind. If he played this game right, then he would gain a Jinchuriki, and not just any Jinchuriki but the strongest of all the Jinchuriki, to mold into a weapon for the greater good of the village. A plan was already forming in his mind, followed by several backup strategies for every scenario. After a moment Danzo once again reached for his herbal tea, sipping the lukewarm liquid as he continued to make preparations. With a wave of his hand he dismissed all but 5 root operatives, sending them back to their positions within the village. He did not know who this female Kumonin was, and until he had confirmation of her identity he would not bother with her. Questions as to why they were here could also wait for a later time. Uzumaki Naruto was his primary interest, but for now he would play his part as Hiruzen's ally in this mess and keep the boy secret from Fugaku and his Uchiha horde. He would do what was best for Konoha, even if it perceived him and his troops as villains. That was what he and his root were. The silent guardians and shadow operatives of the superpower which was the village hidden in the leaves. They would protect the village, even if doing so meant using methods that Sarutobi and his soft-minded followers frowned upon. That was the reason for their existence. That was Root. Chapter 3. One large headache. Kitten, wake up! She groaned as something was forcing her tired and mentally exhausted mind to reality. The first sign that she was coming to was a continuous, painful pounding in her skull, like someone was using her head as a drum. It was worse than any headache she had ever felt in her life, and that included the day after her 16th birthday binge drinking session with Kirabai. Damn it, wake up! They're about to. Any words her prisoner was about to express was suddenly flushed out of her mind, like someone had closed and locked a soundproof door between her and the Nekomata. She felt her body weaken and, slowly forcing herself awake, she felt something flutter against her stomach, below her navel, where the seal that kept the Nibi imprisoned was. Then a hand slammed into her abdomen. Not hard, and a voice called out a series of words. Yoku Atsufun, dire bear. Her seal began to burn, her skin began to burn. It was like being struck by that overpowered lightning clone again, only 10 times worse. She screamed a stifled cry before passing out. Before the darkness took her she heard a voice, angry. Damn it, I thought you guys put her under. Slowly Yugito opened her eyes, blinking a few times to remove the gum which threatened to glue shut. She was lying in a comfortable bed, her form covered by white linen. The room was barren, only white walls, the smell of disinfectant, a bedside table with a lamp, no window, probably underground. Looking down, Yugito saw that she wasn't in her Anbu attire anymore. Instead she was wearing a simple hospital gown, and to her growing horror she found that her hands and legs were secured by leather straps. Immediately she was alert, trying to gather some chakra into her hands, but nothing came. She tried her legs, nothing. Yugito reached deep within herself, looking for the flaming azure chakra of her partner, only for her mind to hit an invisible barrier, which gave no quarter despite her best mental efforts. The armored door at the other end of the room opened with an ominous creak, and the former Kumonin found herself at the mercy of whoever walked through that door. Who would it be? This was Konoha, and she was an enemy shinobi caught in their territory, so it would likely be a member of the village's Anbu, the torture and interrogation squad. She frowned, trying to remember who the head of this village's interrogation department was. Her blood froze. Morino Iviki, the man was something of a legend, rumored to have broken a rakish candidate in under an hour during their little series of border skirmishes 4 years ago. Her thoughts suddenly shifted, the mental image of a smiling 8-year-old invading her head. She fought an urge to panic. Where was Naruto? Was he alright? If these bastards hurt him, Yugito didn't care what kind of seal they placed on her, she would, as her adopted son would say, go wild. The door opened, and to the recently made Nukenin's surprise, it was not the towering form of Morino Iviki, instead it was someone else. He was an old man, maybe in his mid-60s, with tan skin blotched with liver spots, a well-kept white goatee and a lit pipe in his mouth. He wore the formal robes of a cage with the hat nestled on his head. She knew who he was, the Sundaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the legendary professor. Another stepped into the room, and by the unkempt mane of spiked white hair she knew it was the Toad Sage. Two of the most well-decorated and powerful shinobi that the village of Kumogakure no Sato had ever had, and here she was, tied down and defenseless. Yugito cursed her stupidity, her arrogance. All she wanted was to get Naruto away from Kumo, from Konoha, from anywhere where shinobi ruled. Her plans were to make a run for the Land of Iron, and disappear into the domains protected by the samurai, where no ninja would dare tread and where their identities would remain hidden. It was a fool's gambit, and she berated herself for it. She looked up to see Jiraiya frown, then turned to Sarutobi. "Did you order the restraints?" Said man took a long puff of his pipe, his look completely serious now. "I did not," he said before turning to two young nurses standing by the door. "Who ordered the restraints?" "It was a message from the palace," Hokage-sama the taller one piped up, a little worriedly. Both student and teacher looked to each other in quiet alarm, albeit well hidden. Who in the Hokage Tower would know of this woman's existence in the village? "Well, remove them." The two nurses nodded before hurrying to Yugito's bed, each one removing her legs and arms from the bindings before hurrying back to their positions at the back of the room, and being quickly dismissed by the Hokage. When the door closed again, both men were staring intently at her as she rose up to a sitting position, absently rubbing her wrists. "I'm sure introductions are unnecessary," the Sandaime said, taking a puff of his pipe. Yugito nodded, but did not give any other reply. Her mind was already going through methods of getting out of this room, finding Naruto and escaping this village before they went on full alert. She needed to find where her charge was, after that everything else would fall into place. Slowly she tried once again to draw chakra, only to come up blank. "Oh, by the way, and I can't believe we didn't tell you this," the Toad Sage said with a slightly embarrassed grin, hand reaching to scratch the back of his head. "For purposes of national security and all, we kind of sealed your chakra away. Sorry about that." "You sealed it?" she asked blankly, the information taking several moments to filter into her tired brain. Her eyes widened. "You sealed it?" Jiraiya frowned. "Well, of course we sealed it. You're a foreign ninja found and captured in our territory. It's standard procedure." Yugito stared in complete surprise at the pair, before falling back into bed with a feral feline growl. It was all supposed to be rather simple. Break Naruto out of Sakamoto's Anbu torture department. Get out of Kumogakure. Get out of Kamimari no Kuni. Traverse to Hai no Kuni. Avoid all shinobi contingents and patrols. Move through Hai no Kuni to Tetsu no Kuni. In her mind, Yugito had royally fucked up. Instantly her thoughts went to her training under such circumstances, and that was to say nothing but her name, rank and shinobi identification number. But she stopped herself. She wasn't a ninja of Kumogakure no Sato anymore, now she was just a Nukenin. "What were you doing in Hai no Kuni?" It was Jiraiya's voice. "And why were you being attacked by your fellow ninja?" She sighed, an arm over her face, then the images of a certain 8-year-old boy once again cut into her memories. "Naruto," she gasped, sitting stark upright in bed, only to whimper as her sore body protested the movement. "Where is Naruto? Is he alright?" The two elder shinobi seemed slightly taken aback by her sudden outburst, though it only took the form of their eyes widening. What got them was not the question. It was the pleading tone in her voice, plus the look of worry in her eyes. Sarutobi took another puff of his pipe before he answered her. "He is fine, getting some sleep in one of the empty Anbu rooms." She seemed to deflate in relief. The Sandaime saw her reaction, and besides the situation a small smile threatened to form across his aging features. "So you gained a friend, Naruto? From what Naruto has told me, he sees you as a mother figure." A smile crept across her face, a genuine smile. "I suppose so. I was only supposed to be his guardian. But the little pup got to me. He has a habit of doing that, Hiruzen replied with a chuckle. The kid has a gift. He grabbed a chair, and sat down. His movements mirrored by Jiraiya. I want you to relax. From what my former pupil has told me, you were protecting Naruto from a group of Kumonin, so you will not be perceived as a threat or a prisoner. I am curious as to why you had Naruto and why you were fighting Kumonin in our territory. Can you elaborate for us? The Nibi Jinchuriki thought for a moment, before sighing in defeat. She wasn't a ninja of Kumo anymore, no matter how she tried to delude herself. That and the way the old man talked to her made her feel like she was before her own grandfather, before he died. I was fleeing from Kumogakure to protect Naruto, she began. Eyes closed and head bowed in submission. A powerful elder was able to overturn the raikage and place Naruto in a questionable training program to try and control his beast. The council was unhappy about his lack of progress, and were willing to agree to any proposal. Her eyes opened, revealing orbs of pure steel. I kidnapped him from the bastard, betrayed my village and my cage to get him out. I am now a nuke nin because of my actions. The Sandaime nodded. That coincides with our reports from Kumogakure. You were declared a nuke nin roughly 4 days ago, and had a 50 million Ryo bounty placed on your head. 4 days, she asked, slightly surprised. How long was I out? 5 days, Jiraiya answered, ignoring her surprise. Your wounds were quite severe. If you weren't a Jinchuriki, then you would have probably died. She froze, blood running cold at the very mention of that word, or the fact that they knew of her condition. Her being one of the sacrificed was considered an S-class secret in Kumogakure. Only the raikage, clan heads, Jonin commanders and elders knew of it. In fact, the effort that went into keeping her and Kurobai's condition secret was almost fanatical. When she looked back at the Sanin, he just smirked in reply. I have a very good intelligence network. The best I hear, was her reply. You can relax, Hiruzen cut in lightly. We do not plan on handing either you or Naruto back to Kumo. She blinked. Then what do you plan to do with us? The old man sighed. At the moment, nothing. For no, both you and Naruto are to be placed in protective custody. Only Anbu loyal to me and a few Jonin level shinobi will be given clearance to your rooms, and you will have a full guard around the clock. I want to see him, she said after a moment, and at their looks she reiterated, just to make sure he's alright. Once again the old man sighed. He seemed to do that a lot. I'll see to it. For now, get some rest. You look a little worse for wear. With that, both Jiraiya and the Hiruzen left the room, leaving a bewildered former Kumonin in their wake. As the steel door closed and the pressure locks were activated, Jiraiya spoke up. She may not be loyal to Kumo anymore, but I doubt we'll get anything from her. Sarutobi nodded. I agree. He was silent for a handful of seconds. Jiraiya, I'll leave both her and Naruto in your care. The first chance you get, take him to her. You sure that's a good idea? The old man shrugged. She knows we won't let Naruto go again. I think with a little coaxing she will consider joining the village as a shinobi. You plan on recruiting her? The Sanin asked, before turning thoughtful. True, she would be a valuable asset to the village and a possible ace to scare the Uchiha into submission, but she still has ties with her old home, most likely family. And her relationship with Naruto, the Sandaime added after speaking to the two of them. There is little doubt in my mind that their relationship is similar to that of a mother and child, or at least that of siblings. Trying to separate them would most likely be an ugly affair. A ninja fell from the rafters, landing in a crouch before them, kneeling and awaiting their word. What is it? Jiraiya asked. My apologies for disturbing you, Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sama, the Anbu replied, reaching into his flak jacket and pulling out a small scroll. But I was ordered to present this to Hokage-sama. Another meeting of the council has been called. Sarutobi frowned as he took the scroll, dismissing the ninja before opening it. His eyes shot from right to left as he read it, and his frown grew. Jiraiya, seeing his former teacher's annoyance, nudged him. What? Danzo has called for another meeting of the council, Sarutobi explained. I must go. I trust you to look after the two. Jiraiya grinned. Off course. And no funny business. The Sanin actually made a good show of looking offended. Do you honestly think I would take advantage of a helpless female? Yes, the Hokage replied dryly, without hesitation. I am offended, nay, insulted that you think as such. Sarutobi just frowned, finding that he did that a lot today. The Council of Fire was the designated name given to the ruling committee of Kumogakure no Sato, an assembly made up of the heads of the major shinobi clans, as well as elder ninja whose experience and knowledge were in themselves valuable assets. However, the Council of Fire was an advisory body. It was the Hokage who made the final decisions, something that Hiruzen had made a priority since his reinstatement, making sure that while the councils had their say, it was he who was in charge. In truth, there were two councils in Kumogakure, the Council of Fire, who presided as the advisors to the Hokage in all shinobi matters, and a civilian council who dealt with the day-to-day running of the village. The second council was made of merchants and business owners, and was mostly responsible for trade, finance and the running of non-military industries. They were not the problem. All of their activities were monitored by the Onbu in case of any abuse of power. They were simply there to run the numbers and keep the village running smoothly. The problem was in his advisory council, and as he entered he saw that a heated argument was already underway. All of the clan heads were present and accounted for. Tsume Inuzuka, head of the infamous Inuzuka clan, was snarling like a feral wolf, looking ready to jump over the table and maul her opponent, Danzo. The Sandaime was not surprised. The Inuzuka were one of his strongest supporters. Their pack mentality, born from their close bonds with wolves and dogs, meant that they saw the Hokage as the alpha male of the pack, which was Konoha. In truth, he was glad he had the Inuzuka on his side. Their clan was considered one of the largest with over 300 members, 205 of which were ninja. If the Inuzuka represented his more zealous followers, then the Hyuga were his quiet and calm advisors. The current clan head, Hiyashi Hyuga, rose from his seat and asked Tsume to calm down, and Danzo to stop antagonizing her. The woman listened, falling into her chair with a huff and a murderous glare. It was Shikaku Nara, head of the shadow-manipulating Nara clan, who noticed him, and abruptly stood, bowing his head in respect. Hokage-sama. All bickering was forgotten as the other clan heads and elders rose from their chairs, mirroring the Nara clan head's motions. Hokage-sama, they said in unison. The Sandaime nodded as he walked towards his seat, noticing that the Uchiha chair was vacant. The meeting chamber of the clan was deep beneath the surface, within one of the mid-levels of the underground Onbu headquarters. It was a darkened chamber of gray stone, a large round table and chairs of marble adorning its center, the symbol of the Leaf Village engraved onto the core of the table. At the backs of each chair were the carved symbols of Konoha's major clans. Both the Namikaze and Uchiha chairs were empty, the Namikaze because of their supposed extinction and the Uchiha because they were boycotting all council meetings. "I trust there is a reason for bringing us all together, Danzo?" Sarutobi asked, fixing his ex-arch-rival with a patient stare. "There is, Hokage-sama," the old man replied in his usual stoic manner. "As you know, peace talks with the Uchiha have so far ended in failure. It is only a matter of time before they make their move against the village." Many of the council members frowned. This was common knowledge among the assembly, and they had gathered their clans in preparation for such a conflict if it ever occurred. Sarutobi nodded, taking a puff of his pipe. He knew it better than anyone. "This is common knowledge, Danzo, and we are preparing ourselves in case the Uchiha turn hostile." "Not if, Sarutobi. The question is when," the bandaged councilman replied. "From my roots reports, the Uchiha are making secret preparations with the Chunin under their command. We expect them to move within a week, 2 at the most." "This would never have happened if you hadn't have crashed the negotiations," Danzo Tsume growled. "Indeed," Inoiki Yamanaka added in agreement. "Your actions and words were reckless." The former Onbu commander looked at both in turn. "The village hidden in the leaves will never give all of our power to a single clan, least of all a clan who considers themselves superior to everyone else. We are not Iwa. Those were not negotiations, they were demands, and I simply made my feelings known." Silence reigned. For as much as they hated to admit it, the old warhawk was correct. The negotiations would have never been fruitful. The Uchiha would accept nothing more than full surrender of all other Leaf Shinobi. The rumors of a Sharingan wielder being behind the Kyubi no Yoko's attack was an idea that refused to go away. The clan knew this, and found themselves driven into a corner, and a cornered animal would lash out if provoked. "Is there more to this than stating the obvious, Danzo?" Hiruzen asked. He also knew of the Uchiha movements, and implemented the suitable countermeasures. "I propose a preemptive strike against the Uchiha clan before they can attack us, and end this insurrection before it even begins," Danzo answered, rising from his chair so that all could see him. "I already have agents within their ranks. All that is needed is the word and the hammer will fall." Murmuring broke out among the council at this statement. A chance to end this war before it even began? The idea was one which many among the clans had wished for. A war with the Uchiha would cost them the lives of their kin. Many mothers, father, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins and grandparents would die by the Sharingan users' hands unless they moved to stop them. No, all looked at Sarutobi in surprise, the old man looking unflinchingly into the dark orbs of his rival. "I refuse to just give up on the chance of a diplomatic solution not being found. The Sharingan is one of our main advantages against the other villages." Sarutobi Danzo said, warning in his tone. "One clan cannot be held more important than the entire village. Yes, if we lose the Uchiha then we lose one of our bloodlines. But they are not worth the entire village. All I am asking for is more time, Danzo Hiruzen replied. 3 days. Give me 3 days. If the Uchiha do not capitulate then I will give you permission to go along with this plan. Damn you, Sotobai. We may not have 3 days, the aging Warhawk thought with a growl, about to say as much before stopping himself. Further attempts to convince his old rival would end with failure. If nothing else, Hiruzen was stubborn in his goals once he set his mind to them. With a dramatic sigh he bowed his head in defeat. As you wish, Hokage-sama. But already a contingency plan was forming in his mind. The agent in the Uchiha ranks was one of Sarutobi's own Anbu, the prodigy of the entire clan, Uchiha Itachi. If he could forge the needed documents and present them to the young Anbu captain, then he was certain the kid would act. He had found that Itachi had more loyalty to the village than his family, mostly because of their actions during the last war with Kumo. Then there was his knowledge of one Uzumaki Naruto. Perhaps he could use that to his advantage. Tell Hiruzen that he knew the child was back in Konoha and threatened to bring it before the council, Uchiha included, if he did not yield and order the strike. Danzo knew for a fact how protective the aging Hokage was of the blonde. But the retired Anbu commander quickly dispelled such a notion. The Uchiha would use the knowledge to declare war, to destroy the council and to kill the boy. When it came down to it, there was a choice of either the power of the Kyuubi no Yoko, or the Sharingan. Both had the possibility of becoming potent weapons. He would rather have both if he could. Whether the Sun Daime liked it or not, if he failed the Uchiha clan would die. Before he knew it, the council had adjourned, all other topics dealt with quickly and precisely. The clan had slowly began to file out of the chamber, and slowly Danzo rose to his feet, finding Hiruzen still seated in his chair. The old Warhawk strolled over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder to gain his attention. A moment of your time, Hiruzen. The Sun Daime frowned, but nodded, waiting until the last of the council left before allowing him to speak. What is it, Danzo? A simple matter of security is all, the retired commander responded. It has come to my attention that you have a Kumonin in the medical wing of Anbu headquarters, and a certain child. It was hard to rattle Hiruzen Sarutobi, but the root leader could say with a fair degree of smugness that he had done just that. Even if the only visible change was a slight widening of the professor's eyes. I see, was his reply. And what do you plan to do with this information? For now, nothing, Danzo answered. For now we should focus on the threat the Uchiha pose. Imagine what would happen if they gained such information? It was a bluff, but Hiruzen didn't know that. So my suspicions were correct, the Hokage muttered, causing the old Warhawk to narrow his eyes. I had a feeling you had someone in my Anbu squads. Only a few knew of the arrival of those two. Jiraiya is immediately out, as are Suki and Mei, considering they have not left the boy's side since he arrived. Misaki and her medical team are fiercely loyal to me, so that leaves Yuji. It was hard to rattle Danzo, but by the sudden widening of his eyes, followed by a dangerous narrowing, the legendary professor had just achieved that. What have you done with my Anbu, Danzo? I have done nothing, the old man replied, sighing in defeat. He is in his apartment, with suppression and capture seals in place to keep him out of trouble. I see, Hiruzen replied, before looking to the ceiling. Kakashi. There was a blur of movement in front of them, and a single Anbu dropped into a kneeling position. Dressed in full Anbu attire with a dog mask covering his face, spiked silver hair, a katana sheathed to his back, full armor and kunai holsters high. Hokage-sama. Go to Yuji's apartment and release him from the seals, then take him to the hospital for a full medical. Hi, Hokage-sama, the Kopinin replied before vanishing in a blur of wind and leaves. When his chakra signature vanished, Sarutobi turned to his old rival. Anything else, Danzo? No, Hokage-sama, the bandaged councilman replied through gritted teeth before spinning on his heel and stalking towards the entrance, leaving the professor alone with his thoughts. If Danzo knew, then he would have to step up his security. Suki and Mei were capable, but they were B-rank ninja. It was time he sent in an elite. Danzo walked with a purpose through the low-lit tunnels of the Anbu headquarters, ignoring his own personal guard who were following him along the rafters above, as silent as the grave. Eventually the dreary tunnels began to brighten, the drab, meters-thick concrete walls giving way to timber furnishings and rays of mid-morning sun as he ascended to the Hokage Palace, his feet instinctively moving through the well-lit corridors to his destination. Two loyal Chunin guards stood at the door, nodding respectfully as he entered. The room was a small meeting hall, barely 2 meters by 2 meters, with 2 large, plush sofas and a mahogany table, a closed window allowing just the right amount of light to enter. In this room, sitting on the sofas, drinking herbal tea and waiting patiently, were the other 2 elders of the council. They were Homer Amito Kato and Kohari Utatane, both former teammates and close friends of Hiruzen. Both, like Hiruzen, were trained by the Nidaime Hokage, and over the years before their retirement they were considered some of the strongest and smartest ninja. The respect they held with the shinobi of the village had gained them places of authority as elders. You saw it wasn't a question. Danzo knew that he could never side them permanently against Sarutobi. Their friendship went beyond such disputes. The Sandaime wants to bid his time a little while longer, but we all know that such a decision could be our downfall. Koharu nodded. As much as I hate to admit it. You are right, Danzo. Homer aside, taking his glasses off to massage his temple. We will support your mission when the vote comes. The scarred elder raised a brow. And what of Sarutobi? The village comes first, the elderly woman said firmly. If Hiruzen fails, then give the order to strike. Sometimes the advantages of having a homicidal demon sealed within you outweigh the problems, even when said demon was locked away by a seal designed to make cage-level ninja as weak as newborn kittens. Yugito looked at her arm, once broken, now healed, and breathed a sigh of relief. The moment the bones had been reset, her healing ability had set to work, and within an hour the fracture's forearm had knitted itself back together. It still hurt when she moved it too fast, but it was a definite improvement. The burn marks were nearly gone, with nothing more than a few blemishes which would vanish in another half hour or so, and her cracked ribs had knitted themselves back together before she had woke up. Her cat-like eyes darted to the side, scanning the large form of her bodyguard. Jiraiya was leaning against the wall, arms folded, head bowed and eyes closed. Trying to look cool or asleep on his feet, Yugito couldn't be sure. The kanji on your headband. Jiraiya looked up at the woman. Yeah? Trying to look cool wins. It stands for oil, doesn't it? Yeah. Her nose crinkled slightly. It was actually pretty cute. Why would you put oil on your headband? The old man chuckled. I'm a sage of the toads, hot stuff. Haven't you ever heard of toad oil? She shook her head, seemingly ignoring the hot stuff part. Never fought against a toad summoner before, so no. It was obvious she was bored out of her mind, and just wanted to talk to someone to pass the time. It was the most he had gotten out of her since she woke up. I heard a rumor I want you to ratify for me. She looked at him, and the Sannin could have sworn that her expression would perfectly suit a curious cat. If it's a matter of village security, then forget it. I'm not comfortable to divulge my home secrets just yet. Fair enough, Jiraiya replied, but the rumor is more about you, Azure Cat. Is it true you can summon cats? She smiled at that. Now that would be divulging my clan's secrets, Jiraiya-sama. He laughed. I guess it would. To answer your question, Yugito replied, no, I can't summon cats, but I can summon one of their bigger cousins. Ho ho, the Sannin hummed, leaning in closer. Well, what is it? This would be perfect for his research. He already had a character outline of her for his new book, maybe add a few cat ears, a tail and a little familiar. Can you keep the secret? She asked, and at his bobbing nod smiled teasingly. So can I. Cute, the Sannin replied dryly. She gave off a Cheshire Cat's grin, before the latch to the armored door turned, catching her attention. Jiraiya noticed how her ears seemed to perk up, and guessed she had augmented senses as well. The door opened, and a little blonde bundle blurred into the room, jumping into the air and landing in Yugito's arms. She smiled as she hugged him, glad he was alright more than anything. Jiraiya blinked. One moment she was a teasing teenager, and now she had the soft look of a caring mother, and he had to admit it was damn sexy. Then he looked down at the blonde, and sighed. He had been driven right into her considerable cleavage by the embrace. I would kill for that. Are you alright? She asked, and once again the Sannin was amazed by the softness of her voice. Yeah, I'm fine, Naruto replied. Stop worrying about me and worry about yourself for once. How are your injuries? Are they healing okay? Are they treating you well? She smiled a genuine smile. I'll be fine. A couple of days and I'll be right. As Reina teasing smile graced her lips. Are they keeping that bottomless pit full? The hospital food here stinks, Naruto replied with a pout. I'd rather have some of your cooking. I'm not that good. Yes, you're the younger blonde replied without hesitation. I said so, Samui Nichan said so, Kirabai said so, heck, even Raikage-sama says so. For a moment he saw sadness in her eyes, but it was just for a moment. It appeared Naruto noticed this too, for he burrowed his face into her chest. It's my fault you're hurt. Never say that, she admonished lightly, ruffling his spiky hair. I did what I did because I wanted to. Nothing was more important to me than getting you out of that hell. But because of me you were forced to leave the village, leave Samui Nizan and the others. She bopped him on the head, leading to a slight yelp. Don't you dare think this mess was your fault, for it wasn't. It's all on Sakamoto's head, do you understand me? The firmness in her voice was surprising, and at his nod she held him close again. Jiraiya shook his head in amusement. For all intents and purposes they really looked like a mother and son. And deep down he was thankful the little brat had found someone to become the mother figure he needed, even if she was barely an adult herself. With a sigh he realized they had forgotten his presence and cleared his throat, stirring the two from their reunion. "I'm guessing you guys are hungry," he spoke up, "and you might need to stretch your legs, so I've been authorized to escort you through Unbu headquarters." Yugito looked down at the hospital gown she was wearing. "And you expect me to wear this?" The gown truly did not deserve the name clothing, considering its opening at the back, and the lack of undergarments underneath them. Jiraiya had actually hoped for at least a flash of some skin for his novel, but by her look he guessed it would never happen. "Never fear," the Sannin roared boisterously, pulling out a small storage scroll and, biting off the seal, spread it across the floor, making a couple of hand signs before slamming his hand against the paper. A small explosion followed, and once it cleared she saw a black shirt with dark purple trim, a pair of dark blue jeans and a pair of sandals. Yugito unconsciously whistled. She was no fashion snob, but it was pretty good. Then she glared at Jiraiya, who had a look of perverted glee on his face. "Do you mind?" "Not at all," he replied. "By all means, you may begin any time." With a venomous stare she pointed to the door, her eyes refusing to leave his out. "Someone needs to make sure you don't try to escape," he explained, although she could have sworn he was about to froth. Damn, she had no idea the legendary Jiraiya was such a pervert. "And how am I going to do that?" she asked blandly. "That door's the only way in or out." She had him there. With a sigh of defeat he turned and left, barely hearing her ask Naruto, considerably more nicely, if she could have some privacy. The blonde nodded before following the Sannin out. With a sigh Yugito got out of bed and quickly undid the cords at the back of her gown, allowing the clothing to pool at her feet. She put on the jeans first. The trousers were skin-tight but otherwise the right size. Next was the shirt, a little baggy but it would suffice. No panties or bra had been left out, so she guessed she was going to go without. Knocking on the door as she finished slipping on the sandals, she was greeted by a wide-eyed Naruto and a strangely giddy Jiraiya. "What?" she asked, hands subconsciously going through the motions of tying her hair into a ponytail. Jiraiya tried not to drool as she held a piece of white cloth in her mouth. "Nothing at all," the Sannin replied, blushing and trying not to drool, before nudging the blonde right brat. The boy just nodded, quickly yet mechanically, causing the Nibi Jinchuriki to openly glare at the Toad Sage's back as he walked down the corridor. She didn't know of the observation room, and its one-way viewing mechanism hidden behind the western wall, or the fact that she was officially one of the main characters in Jiraiya's next book. All he needed to think of was a name. How about Yukiko? Norimasa Sakamoto was considered by many to be one of the smartest individuals in Kumogakure. He was a man who prided himself on his patience and willingness to adapt to any situation or scenario. It was the reason why he was still alive at the age of 68 while many of his comrades and rivals had perished on the field of battle. But Norimasa Sakamoto was also a man who did not like to have his well-laid plans derailed from under him, not when he was so close to reaching his target. He had put so much work into gaining a Jinchuriki, bribing, blackmailing and sweet-talking clan leaders and elders to vote his way. He had even made sure that the brat's conditioning through normal methods be sabotaged. And for what? The Nico bitch had derailed everything. All his plans turned to ash because she had suddenly grown a conscience. What was worse was that the wreckage waited until the pursuit team returned before marking her as a nuke nin, and the bumbling fools had failed miserably. Despite his subtle attempts to try and gain the council's vote in sending half the Hunter Nin Corps into the Land of Fire to look for the renegade in her charge, the wreckage had quickly shut it down. Sending half the corps into Hinokuni would provoke both Konoha and the armies of the Fire Daimyo into declaring open war, and Kuma was not ready to face the sleeping giant which was Hinokuni. Sakamoto had capitulated after hearing this, calming down and reminding himself that although the loss of both Jinchuriki was a massive blow, war with their leaf rivals would make the blow fatal. He needed to find another way to drag the whore and the little bastard back to Kumo, but how? Using Kumo shinobi was immediately out of the question, even those from his own clan would not wish to incur the Raikage's wrath if they failed. Threatening Hinokuni would not work either, although the two villages weren't exactly the worst of enemies anymore. There was still a lot of residual resentment from the skirmishes and the Hyuga incident 4 years ago. Then it hit him. There was a way to do this without starting a war, and it was so simple it was almost funny. Hiring independents or nuke nin to retake the Kyubi and Nibi was his only option. Even though most clans had joined a village or country by now, there were still several dozen traveler ninja clans in existence. He needed to hire a descent group, not some bunch of cast-offs who couldn't make the grade. He quickly found the ideal group, a small unit of Kiri shinobi who had recently deserted their village because of the recent civil war. He had heard of a couple of them, all either A or B rank shinobi renowned as trackers and hunters. Sakamoto had sent out one of his couriers with the contract, along with the promise that they keep the full bounty on the whore's head, plus an extra $1 million if they took the boy, both still breathing of course, though he would accept crippled or comatose. There was only one problem. The leader of this small group wanted a meeting with the employer. Apparently the man was fairly paranoid, and wanted to meet the client face to face rather than rely on information from a middleman. His courier's head was returned in a basket, along with a note on where to meet, a small village on the border in 3 days' time. Excusing himself from the village was an easy dilemma, and the Raikage seemed pleased that he would be gone for a few days. He took with him a small honor guard of his fellow clansmen, all Jonin-level shinobi, and traveled to the rendezvous point. The rendezvous, Shimane village, was a small fishing settlement located 10 kilometers from the border, and right on the beach of the Eastern Sea. It was quiet and tranquil, with a modest population of 150 by the last consensus. A small, homey bar was the exact spot, and without a word the retired Jonin walked in, flanked by 2 of his senior clansmen, both able-bodied ninja. All wore simple civilian attire, plain tunics, pants and sandals, though each had a kunai holster under their trouser legs. They took a seat, ordered a couple of drinks, and waited. They did not have to wait long. 4 figures entered the bar, all hidden behind worn light gray cowls and cloaks. They saw them, and the leader, easily the largest man of the small group, took a seat across from Sakamoto. His 3 other compatriots, one of which looked like a child, walked over to the bar and took stools, ordering a couple of drinks themselves. The man's eyes were beady and a dark brown, the lower half of his face covered in bandages. His skin was tanned, which was odd considering that by the climate of Mizuno-kune the people were usually pale. A large protrusion stuck out of the back of his cloak, most likely a large sword. Not surprising, considering large body-size swords were normal equipment. It was the signature of a Kiri Jonin. "You know who I am," the man said in a low tone, his voice gritty. Sakamoto nodded. "I expected able-bodied ninja. I did not expect a member of the infamous Kiri no Shinobi Katana Nanan and Shu. The civil war in Kumogakure no Sato must be brutal if even their most powerful warriors are deserting the Mizukage." "Do you have a point, old man?" the towering shinobi asked, his voice a growl. No point," the scientist replied. "Simple curiosity is all." He reached into his tunic and pulled out 2 small photographs, tossing them over to the Kirinin, and watched as he caught them deftly. The man studied the pictures, and snorted disbelievingly. "A woman and a kid," he muttered. "That woman is an S-class ninja, and the child is of great interest to us," Norimasa explained, but did not go beyond that. The hired dog didn't need to know all the details, even though the dog was more like a wolf. "Where are they?" "Our trackers lost them after they entered Hinokuni," was the reply. "Although the reports are sketchy, we believe them to be somewhere in Kumogakure no Sato." "You want me and my boys to go into one of the 5 great shinobi villages, kidnap an S-class ninja and her charge, and bring them back to you?" "Forgive me," Norimasa said in a conversational tone. "I thought this type of mission was right up the alley for a former member of the Kiri no Shinobi Katana Nanan and Shu." "Perhaps I was mistaken." His quip got the needed response, and the feral growl from the man was just barely audible. "Fine, we'll do this mission for you." He looked up, and Sakamoto knew that, even with the bandages, the man was smiling. 51 million ryo isn't going to cut it though, not for such a mission. "Double the reward, and you've got a deal." The retired Kumo commander frowned. "I think we're done here and made to stand." It would be such a shame if Konoha were informed that Kumo was planning an infiltration mission right into their heart, the swordsman replied nonchalantly, causing Sakamoto to stop. Stooped over the table. "Might make them up their security some." "You wouldn't dare," the aging elder snarled. Mirth danced in the Kirinin's eyes. "Oh, but I would. See, I figure the reason you're hiring me and my boys and not just sending in your own hunter nin teams is because you don't want to spark an international incident if you fail. That or the Raikage doesn't know of your little backroom deals." The former swordsman leaned forward, his breath barely a whisper. "Double the price, or we warn Konoha." Sakamoto snarled, before bowing his head. "Very well. 80 million ryo for the woman, 3 million for the boy." The Kirinin nodded, before rising from his chair. "Pleasure doing business." He was stopped by a hand, shooting up with impressive speed to grab his arm. The man turned to come face to face with the chief scientist. "But know this. If you double-cross me, I will send my entire clan out to hunt you down, and not even you, demon of the bloody mist, would be able to survive." Zabu Zamamochi snatched his hand away and turned to leave, motioning to his 3 associates as he went. When they left, the head of the Sakamoto clan openly spat at the door. "If he survives this, I will kill him for such disrespect." Chapter 4. A decision. Yugito had no idea how hungry she was until she stepped into the cafeteria, and upon the whiff of cooked food there was a sudden, almost deafening, to her at least, growl from her stomach. She looked around with a slight blush, only to relax when she saw the place was empty besides the kitchen staff, and a few off-duty ninja. The moment she, Naruto and Jiraiya had chosen a table, a plate full of food was placed in front of her. A basic breakfast meal really. A large bowl of white rice, a large slab of grilled fish fillet with side pickles, a bowl of miso soup, some seasoned sheets of seaweed to wrap the fish and rice into, and a small bowl of fermented soybeans. Her eyes lit up like street torches at the fish. A rather strange side effect of having a nekomata sealed inside you was that the host gained quite a lot of its demon's likes and dislikes. Because of this, Yugito loved fish at an almost fanatical level. To her, fish of almost any kind was considered the holiest creations on the planet. Her speed was blurring, and barely 30 seconds after the food was placed before her, all that remained were spotless plates. Then she asked for another. Naruto and Jiraiya had been given the same dish, yet by the time they finished their meals, the blonde-haired Kumo had finished her third serving. Eating didn't do the performance justice. She inhaled the food. Leaning back in her chair with the contents eye, the Nibi Jinchuriki looked a hair's breadth away from finding a nice quiet place to take a nap, another side effect. She stopped when she saw the look on her young charge's face. For some reason he refused to meet her eyes, and this worried her. When he wanted something, he had no problem going up to her and asking for it. Same when he had a problem he needed advice with. This shy and nervous kid was not the child she had looked after these few years. "What's the matter?" she asked. Frowning when he twiddled his thumbs, she took on a more firm tone. "Naruto, my eyes are here." She had never seen him look so uncomfortable about something in his life, so with a sigh she motioned him closer. "If you're worried about it, just whisper it to me." For Jiraiya, warning bells were going off in his head, as well as a massive sign flashing neon red for "Get the hell out of there." Knowing in his subconscious exactly what the boy was about to ask about. If she pushed him for why, then he would see firsthand if his speculation about her strength being on par with another certain blonde female was right. Slowly he rose from his chair, sighing in relief when he saw her full attention was on Naruto as he whispered something into her ear, and she replied in a hushed tone while taking a sip of her milk. He edged closer to the door, ignoring the questioning looks the assigned Anbu guards were giving him. Naruto said, "I saw something I think I shouldn't have seen." "Such as?" she asked with a raised brow. "Well, when you went to get changed, the big guy went into a room next door," he explained a little sheepishly, hand scratching the back of his head. "I was bored, so I followed him and she motioned him to continue, taking another sip of her milk. "It was one of those viewing rooms," he explained, seeing her form suddenly go stiff. "Like the ones connected to those questioning rooms." It took a second for the information to filter to her brain, and when it did, she spat out her milk, catching the attention of everyone else in the room. Looking over to him, white liquid dribbling from the corners of her mouth, she asked the dreaded question, "What was he observing?" Now her charge really looked uncomfortable. "Naruto," she asked, her tone forcing him to stare into suddenly merciless brown orbs. "What was he observing?" The child replied, almost looking like he wanted to run. "You." Jiraiya had managed to sneak his way to the door when he felt a sudden, merciless stab of killing intent so utterly deadly it would have probably killed any plants in the immediate vicinity. There was only one other time he had felt intent so potent, and that was when Tsunade had caught him peeping on her in the public bath, and she had nearly killed him. Slowly he turned to see the Kumonin. He could have sworn her eyes had taken a sudden cerulean glow, and she was cracking her knuckles in a very threatening manner. "You." It was more of a feline snarl than a voice. Jiraiya backed up, laughing nervously. "Look, I had no idea the brat was in the room, I swear." "And that makes it all right?" she asked indignantly. He heard a snap, and looked at the chopsticks in her hands. What had him worried was that the chopsticks she had snapped like twigs with her fingers were made of stainless steel. "If it makes you feel any better, you have a steaming hot figure," he said with a nervous laugh. What followed was a sudden maniacal look in her eyes, followed by a growl, and a lunge. The Anbu made no move to stop her, in fact by how they backed away it was the last thing they wanted to do. For Mei and Suki, however, they were looking on with interest. Maybe she could finally beat some sense into the pervert. Jiraiya, Densetsu no Sanin, legendary Toad Sage, student to the Sandaime and sensei to the Yondaime, ran out the door screaming like a little girl, an irate blonde right on his heels, using the snapped chopsticks as senbon needles. It was another 10 minutes before Yugito returned, taking a deep cleansing breath as she walked past the staring Anbu to Naruto. She leaned forward, draping an arm over his shoulder and gently pushing him back towards the table. She couldn't erase the memory from the child, but the next best thing she could do is steer him away from becoming another Jiraiya. With a sigh she looked up to her Anbu guards and reaching into her pocket threw a small notebook at them. The woman with the wolf mask, Mei, instinctively caught the book. Do you know fire jutsu? The woman hesitated, before a small smile formed under the mask. Burn it? Yugito smiled back. Burn it. Naka Shrine was one of many clan shrines located around Konoha. Stone steps led up to a torii gate, the symbol of the Uchiha enshrined on the gateway, and a stone path leading to a large Honden shrine, a giant ornate building made of pine. To the citizens of Konoha, and anyone outside of the Uchiha clan, the shrine was a simple place of worship for the founding clan. However, the shrine was designed for another purpose. In the main hall, hidden by the seventh tatami mat from the far right, was a secret entrance, leading to a spiral staircase of stone steps, which in turn led to a secret room. Within this room it was dark, the only light coming from scented candles. The symbols of the Uchiha clan were imprinted on the walls, and at the far end of the small chamber was a stone tablet, pertaining to the most ancient history and secrets of the clan. In this room, seated cross-legged on plush cushions, were 5 men, dressed in crimson and white robes, their skin crinkled and weathered by age, their eyes hardened by the times they had lived. These 5 men represented the oldest and supposedly wisest of the Uchiha. They were the advisors to the clan head, each one a former shinobi who had unlocked the Sharingan eye. Fugaku Uchiha knew this. The current head of the Uchiha clan knew that these men and their experience were invaluable, and all were in agreement. The time when the Uchiha stayed on the sidelines was over. They were the last surviving founding clan of this village. The Senju was all but extinct. Their last survivor was off in some gambling hut throwing her money away. They should have more say in how this village is run. Sometimes Fugaku Uchiha wondered how it had gotten this bad. Then he remembered, and the memory filled him with rage. The Kyubi no Yoko, in one night a single demon laid waste to the shinobi forces of the Hidden Leaf. Many had died so that the Ondaime could seal it away, including several members of the Uchiha clan. He had spearheaded the campaign to kill the monster once and for all, by mercifully putting down the child chosen to house the beast. He had felt pity for the boy, but he needed to remind himself that there was no boy. The child died the moment the demon was sealed. It needed to be done. But the Sandaime Hokage, forced out of retirement, had put a stop to everything. He had shut down his attempt and put laws in place to protect the child, to protect it. What was worse were the rumors that suddenly started not long after the attack. Rumors that the Uchiha themselves had led the beast to their doorstep, that they were somehow behind the attack. These stories were false, but that didn't stop the village from relocating his clan to a corner of the village where they could be easily monitored. To the clan elders this was a sign that the warning spoken of by their founder, the long-deceased Madara Uchiha, was beginning to come to fruition. Enough was enough. The Uchiha would not be watched like a pack of rabid dogs. It was time for the Sharingan wielders to fight back, to retake this village from the lesser clans, but somehow the Council of Fire, and the Hokage, had caught wind of their plans. This infuriated Fugaku, and made all chances of a bloodless coup d'état impossible. But how could they have known? He and the elders had ordered that it strictly be kept secret. Even within the clan only those who held the rank of clan elder or shinobi knew of the attempt, their civilian members knew nothing. He had even kept it a secret from his wife. Even though Mikado was a jonin herself before she retired, she was not what the elders called a true Uchiha, having married into the clan. It was Hideki Uchiha, one of the eldest in attendance, who spoke. Tell me, Fugaku-sama, what are the results of your investigation? Have you found the informant yet? Not as such, Hideki-san, the head replied. The investigation is still ongoing. Whoever the informer is, he has hidden his tracks very well. This is most troubling. Kazuko Uchiha spoke, his voice raspy and ancient. To think one of our own would willingly betray us. As troubling as it is, Kazuko-san, the fact that the Hokage and the council have caught wind of our plans is proof enough that one of our own has become a spy. Osamu Uchiha said sternly, the 50-year-old man massaging his trimmed dark gray mustache. What about the Chunin? Hideki said, looking to Fugaku. Could one of them not be as loyal as you let on? The Chunin know next to nothing about the coup. The clan head replied calmly, nothing other than that if we did instigate one we would have their support. Osamu growled, most of these Chunin are low class, not from any prestigious clans. How can we trust such commoners at their words? There was a buzz of agreement all around. What about your son Fugaku-sama? Yuma Uchiha asked. You've placed him in Anbu as a spy. What information has he gained? Very little, Fugaku replied, other than the Sandaime is more interested in trying to negotiate a settlement instead of fighting us openly. A smirk appeared on Hideki's face. Hey, Hiruzen is getting senile in his old age. The fool is becoming a pacifist, believing that everything can be settled through discussion. Hiruzen is many things, Kazuko spoke up, but a fool is not one of them. He hates bloodshed, yes, but to him the village is worth more than any individual clan. If we push him too hard, then he will push back. Hiruzen is not so much the problem as Danzo Yuma growled that one-armed mummy has gone to a lot of trouble to spit in our faces. It's almost like he is daring us to make the first move. Do you fear that cripple Yuma-san? The last elder, Minoru Uchiha, spoke up at last, remaining quiet during most of the meeting. Do you fear him and his half-trained root? It is foolish and stupid to not take a threat like Danzo seriously, Yuma replied, and you underestimate his root, Minoru-san. They may not be a match for a well-trained Jonin one-on-one, but they're not supposed to be. Root operatives are trained as assassins and spies. They strike from the shadows and melt back into the darkness once their task is complete. They fear nothing, not even death. Enough, Fugaku growled, smacking the table with his fist. Look at you all, you are acting like a bunch of scared rabbits. Is this really the mighty council of the Uchiha clan? As one, the five elders bowed. We apologize, Fugaku-sama, Hideki intoned. However, our chances of victory are slim. I propose we back away for now, and wait for another opportunity to strike. Murmurings rose up among the elders, silenced by Fugaku's raised hand. Wait for our enemies to drop their guard, then strike for their exposed neck. Very well, I agree. Sarutobi glowered over his desk at the scene, hands stapled together and generally trying to look threatening. At the far end of the room was Jiraiya, trying to look cool and in control when in fact he was sporting a black eye, his clothes riddled with several small holes from near misses. So the old man began calmly, shooting a sorely disappointed look Jiraiya's way. Please explain this all to me. He peeped on you while you were changing, and when you were informed of his, activities you chased him through the halls of Anbu headquarters, utilizing chopsticks as weapons with the seal still firmly in place to boot. Yugito nodded, throwing a murderous glare the Sanin's way which promised pain and possible decapitation if he did it again. The Gama-Senin actually physically flinched under her gaze. And what were the Anbu doing during all of this? Hiruzen asked. Yeah, where were you guys? The Sanin exclaimed. She could have killed me. Soki and Mei looked at each other for a moment, before shrugging. We thought the great and gallant Jiraiya-sama was more than capable of dealing with a shinobi who had her chakra suppressed. The Sanin shot them a hurt look, but any further talk was silenced by the Sandaime clearing his throat. Yugito-san, he said, gaining her attention. I take it you called me for more than to complain about my students' questionable activities. Yes, Hokage-sama, she replied, before looking down to the floor for a moment, her eyes uncertain, battling an internal battle of emotions. I would like to request asylum for Naruto and me. She had been thinking about this the entire night, and as much as she wanted to take Naruto and run, Yugito knew that was impossible. The next best option was to seek sanctuary in another village, preferably another one of the 5 great shinobi villages. It was common knowledge that once a ninja became a member of a village, they were protected by the village, and nowhere else was more zealous in this belief than Kumogakure. Yugito was also no fool. They knew who Naruto was, and they would never willingly allow her to leave with him. The Hokage took a puff of his pipe, as if in deep thought. Before opening the drawer to his desk, there are certain procedures that need to be followed when a shinobi considered a Nukenin wishes to enter our village. He placed the hatai of the leaf on the desk, the metal, adorned with the symbol of the hidden leaf, polished to a shine. First you will need to adhere to a mind examination by a Yamanaka to make sure your wish is genuine. Second, you will be put through a series of tests to assess your skill level. These exams will test your knowledge of ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, weapons knowledge and battle tactics. The second is a prohibition period of no less than 3 months to test if you are truly sincere in your wish. You will be guarded by a select group of my Anbu operatives during this time. It may be best to put a cover story in place about her origins. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya spoke up, his tone deadly serious once again. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. What do you plan to do with Naruto? She asked suddenly. For now I will allow him to remain with you, Hiruzen replied. I have a feeling a stipulation of you staying is that the two of you are not separated. She nodded. But that leaves us with a dilemma. The Sandaime took another puff. As to where the two of you are to stay until you can afford a place of your own. They can stay in one of my apartments. Everyone turned to look at Jiraiya, who smirked. The one in the shinobi district should do, I think. 2-bedroom, open floor, living room and kitchen. A single fully stocked bathroom and a decent view. The young woman raised an eyebrow suspiciously. What's the catch? I just want to make sure my godson is looked after. Jiraiya Hiruzen spoke up warningly. The Sannin frowned at him. She's going to be his guardian, so she might as well know a few things. He stared the woman in the eyes. Unflinching. Naruto is my godson, chosen by both his father and mother. It took a while for the information to sink in, but when it did, Yugito stared venomously at him, wondering where this man was all of Naruto's young life. So where were you? She asked harshly. When I found him, he was sitting on a swing, drenched by the storm and shivering while the orphanage workers locked him out. If he didn't have his prisoner, he would have died of pneumonia. You were there? Jiraiya asked incredulously. All in the room knew what he was talking about. I was one of the ambassador's guards, she replied, knowing that if she wanted these people's trust she needed to tell them everything. Sarutobi sighed. The Hyuga are going to love this if they ever found out. And you were okay with trying to kidnap a 4-year-old girl? I didn't attempt to kidnap her, Yugito shot back. We were ordered to remain at the hotel. The guards weren't told the true purpose of the peace talks until the day before. We were told what would happen and were to leave if the attempt failed. That was it. She started him. You're changing the topic. Where the hell were you when he needed you? Both men looked at each other. Even the Yonbu looked uncertain. In her mind, the Nibi Jinchuriki knew they would be asking questions about her involvement later, but now there were other issues that needed to be sorted, pressing issues that in her mind were more important than a 4-year-old village feud. This time it was Jiraiya's turn to growl. I spent the entirety of his first 4 years trying to protect him. Do you know how many kidnap and assassination attempts were made against the boy in that time? I personally foiled 9 kidnap and 15 assassination attempts, not to mention the 50 others that were never implemented because of my spy network. He needed more than protecting, she all but shouted in agitation. He needed someone to be there for him. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up all alone, to have no one there to look out for you or be there when you got home? She knew from personal experience. She had lost her mother and father when she was young, and most of her family soon after. It was only her and her younger sister he needed more than a silent protector from the shadows. He needed a father figure, someone to tuck him in at night, someone to soothe him when he was scared, someone to worry about him when he didn't come home. She knew this from experience. Damn, did the cub do a number on her stress levels during their first year together? He used to be plagued by terrible nightmares, terrified that people hated him when someone looked at him funny, and that was just his emotional baggage. His manners and personal hygiene were atrocious. To put it bluntly, he had been a mess, a well-hidden one, but a mess. Jiraiya sighed, his tension leaving his muscles. I know. His response surprised her. She was expecting a retort. I know I wasn't there when the kid needed me. But I will be making up for it starting now, by giving you that apartment. He smiled sadly at her. I didn't do the job right, and his parents would have been ashamed of me. His mother would have beaten me to a bloody pulp and his father would have probably killed me. But he has a sister figure in you. You were there when he needed you, and for that I am grateful. She was dumbstruck by such a display, her opinions of this man suddenly taking a U-turn. Suddenly a thought hit her. You knew his parents? Yes, he replied, ignoring the Hokage's threatening glare. Who were they? Unfortunately I can't tell you that, at least not until I know I can trust you. The Sannin replied. I can tell you that while they were alive they made a lot of enemies outside of the village. Enemies who would have no qualms about killing their son for a twisted sense of revenge. She nodded and after a moment of silence, bowed her head. Are you sure it's okay to just give me the apartment? He smiled sheepishly. I haven't been in there for the better part of a decade. Besides, I have another 2 apartments and a house in this village. He reached into his pocket and tossed her a set of keys. It's all yours. Now we definitely need a cover story for you and Naruto, Hiruzen said after a moment, frowning that the Sannin let slip that he was the boy's godfather, but glad he kept tight-lipped about everything else. They would talk about it later if the Hyuga found out. The situation could get messy. There is a civil war going on in Mizunokuni at the moment, Jiraiya thought out loud, and quite a few refugees are fleeing the country. A broad grin emerged. I got it. You and your little brother are refugees from Mizunokuni. You were originally a shinobi of Kumogakure, but your clan was betrayed by the Mizukage. With no other options you took your little brother and fled to Hinokuni. The room was silent. And then the Hokage spoke. If one didn't know any better one would think you were a talented author. The middle-aged man looked pointedly at his former sensei. What you mean, old man? I am an author. The Sandaime shook his head, before setting his eyes on Yugito once again. I will send for a Yamanaka immediately to take care of the mind examination, and if he is satisfied then I will have Jiraiya remove your seal. Once that is done you are to report to Training Area 12 at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. I will send one of my Onbu to put you through the tests. When that is over, return here with Naruto in the afternoon so that we can enroll him in the academy. Yugito nodded her affirmative. If it eases your concerns, I will volunteer for the mind examination. Excellent, the old man smiled, before sounding the buzzer at the end of his desk. A few seconds passed before his secretary, a female chunin, peeped her head through the door. You called, Hokage-sama? Is Inoiki-san in the waiting room? Yes, Hokage-sama, she replied with a nod. Thank you, Nemu-chan, he said with a smile. Has your uncle been waiting long? Nemu Yamanaka shook her head. No, Hokage-sama. Only for about 5 minutes or so. The Hokage hummed. Let him in, and close the doors. Don't let anyone else enter until I say otherwise. She nodded and left for the waiting room. A few moments later she reappeared with another individual. A man in his middle years, his skin, although rugged by age, was not wrinkled, his eyes a dark blue, hair a dark blonde done up in a long ponytail. He wore the jonin attire, black trousers and jacket, a jonin vest, and over it a sleeveless maroon long coat, the headband of the leaf tied to his forehead. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sama, he greeted with a respectful bow before setting his gaze upon Yugito, who met it unflinchingly. Inoiki-san, thank you for coming. Hiruzen returned with a smile. Yugito, this is Inoiki Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan. Inoiki, this is Yugito Ni. Yugito knew of the Yamanaka clan. Of all the clans of Konoha, they were one of the newest to have joined, becoming a major clan of the village just before the outbreak of the Third Shinobi World War. Their numbers were medium, around 80 to 100 strong, and those of them who became ninja excelled as experts of mind reading and control jutsu. To this day the head scientists of Kumo did not know whether the Yamanaka were just skilled in the field of interrogation, or had a Kekkei Genkai. The Yamanaka hesitated for a moment before offering her his hand. Nice to meet you. You too, Yugito replied, accepting his offered hand. Yugito is formerly a member of Kumogakure, the former caretaker of Naruto Uzumaki. The Sandaime explained, knowing full well it was best to inform him now rather than him stumbling upon it later. Inoiki's eyes widened slightly at this, but he remained silent, allowing the Hokage to continue. She fled with Naruto from Kumogakure after a certain series of events, and wishes to join our village so as to protect him. He looked Inoiki in the eye. What I told you and am about to tell you will be an S-class secret. Do you understand? Inoiki nodded. I want you to scan her mind to see if what she says is genuine, though I have little doubt that it is, he explained. Also I must warn you, she herself is a Jinchuriki to a bijou, and although it is one of weakest, I advise you not to probe too deeply. I will keep it at bay, Hokage-sama. Yugito spoke up, ignoring the Yamanaka clan head's fearful look. I have nothing to hide. Are you sure you can suppress it? Although I do not have full control over her, I can tell you that of all the bijou the Nekomata is the most docile. She will not lash out unless she feels threatened, or if I ask her to, Yugito said with a smile, before looking thoughtful for a moment, folding her arms under her bust and tapping a finger against her chin. She's actually really lazy. As well as this, I would like for you to probe her memories of 4 years ago, Sarutobi added, casting a look the former Kumo nin's way. She was one of the high ninja's guardsmen during the Hyuga incident, and I want to know if she had anything to do with the kidnap attempt. Hi, Hokage-sama, Inoiki replied with a bow, casting a suspicious look Yugito's way. Sarutobi looked to the elder blonde for confirmation, who shrugged. I will cooperate. The Sandaime looked thoughtful for a moment, before nodding and motioning to a chair. Take a seat. Let's get this over with. The woman nodded before doing as asked. As Inosuke loomed over her, she began to fidget. So what am I supposed to do? Besides the situation, the head of the Yamanaka clan smiled nervously, not used to doing a voluntary mind examination. Sit up straight, close your eyes, take a deep breath and relax. She nodded and did as asked. If you can hear me, Nibi, allow this man to probe my mind. Yugito could have sworn she heard a purr of agreement before the elder Yamanaka placed his right hand over her forehead. Then everything was still and silent. A pin drop could have been heard. Then she felt it, a slight discomfort, like faint wisps of shadow were seeping through her skull into her mind. Involuntarily Yugito shivered, the tendrils felt so cold. Inoiki tried to keep his ministrations as light as possible, his mind ghosting over the Kumo nin's memories with as much care as he could muster. He saw images of her childhood, the training she went through, her time as a shinobi. He did not linger on these and carefully nudged them aside so he could delve further and gain the information he needed. He stood in a street, one he recognized as the main road of Konoha. A celebration was taking place, people crowded on the sidewalks in the hundreds as a procession of carriages and wagons slowly moved past. He saw the high ninja and all of his guards, including a certain 16-year-old girl flanking him on his left side. He fast-forwarded the memories to the hotel they were staying in and stopped. All 6 of the guardians had been assembled, and the ambassador was explaining the kidnap attempt to them. He was surprised when he felt her emotions of shock and disbelief at the news, even more surprised when she abruptly stood and excused herself, saying she needed a breath of fresh air. He watched as she walked through the city streets, her mind a violent mixture of emotions and doubts. The teenager did not like the plan. This war had taken a lot from her. She had lost her grandfather, uncle and aunt, her last living relatives besides her sister, to the border skirmishes. Yugito did not hate Konoha for this, she just wanted the war to end. It was then that a little boy rushed around the corner and bumped into her. She had been taken by surprise, and immediately turned to yell at the child, but upon seeing his eyes, reddened by tears, she hesitated. An old man came around the corner then, holding a cane threateningly, but by then she had already knelt beside the child. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Inoiki watched as she comforted the boy. So that was how they met. In truth, the clan head was appalled by how the orphanage employees ignored this deranged old man as he threatened the child. Like the rest of the council, the Yamanaka had known of what the boy held prisoner, yet unlike Fugaku, he did not hate him for it. It's not like it was Naruto's fault that he was born on the same day as the Kyuubi attack. He sifted through a few more memories, and came to the conclusion that although she was there, she did not have knowledge of the Hyuga abduction until a few hours before the fact, and she did not partake in the attempt. She did kidnap Naruto, but she thought she was giving him a better life while doing so. It could be forgiven. His first task done, the Yamanaka moved forward to the newer, fresher memories of the last few weeks, checking through them several times over to make sure Yugito was giving him the correct information. The memories swarmed across his vision. At his rate of progress, he may never fully master the 9 tails of his transformation. The Kyuubi's chakra is just too vast and potent that its consciousness would encompass and take over his host. He would become more of a danger to the village than as its protector. The scientist suddenly shut his report, his eyes partially hidden behind his round glasses, unless he let the word hang in the air, not caring to reiterate further. The Raikage tapped his finger against the surface of his desk in impatience, before sighing, "Unless why?" "Unless we put him through the full conditioning." Yugito growled at this. The full conditioning? More like torture. The subject would be conditioned both mentally and physically to become a weapon. She didn't know the details, but what she did know was that the practice was cruel and inhumane in every sense of the words. When the training was complete, the subject would lose all emotion. He would basically become a hollow shell of what he once was, the perfect killer. The Raikage growled at the scientist. "For a moment, if we did that, the boy would be nothing more than a shell of what he is now. No emotions, no individual thought. He would be stripped of all that makes him who he is. Such barbarism has been outlawed." "It is regrettable," the scientist replied, his almond eyes gleaming with a sick joy behind his glasses, "but necessary. I will be putting this forward in the council meeting later today." "But your agreement would make this much faster." "I refuse," he replied without hesitation, fixing the scientist with a glare which would have melted steel, lips twisted in a sneer of disgust. "And I will fight this motion of yours with tooth and nail. There is a reason why I banned all forms of that training, and I doubt you will gain enough support on the council to overrule me." A smile adorned the old man's face. "Of course, Raikage-sama, but I will still put my recommendations forward when the council meeting begins." "You are welcome to do so, Sakamoto," the Raikage said tightly, "and my opinion will remain the same. Now leave me." "Niyugito, by order of the Council of Lightning, you are hereby relieved as guardian to the Kyuubi host, Uzumaki Naruto." He spoke in a deep voice which left no room for argument, before trying to push past her. "On whose authority?" she asked, unmoving. "The Anbu frowned by authority of the Council of Lightning." "I answer only to the Raikage," she replied coldly. "As do you." "You think I enjoy being their lapdog, Captain?" The man spat in annoyance. "If I had my way, I would tell them to shove this order up their asses, but I can't. Now stand aside." "Not a chance," she said, standing doggedly in place, ready to use her position as a captain in the Anbu Corps to her advantage. "I'm your superior boy, and I think I deserve to at least take him there myself instead of allowing him to be lead off by a bunch of complete strangers." The Anbu looked to his associate. "Sakamoto isn't going to like this." Yugito's growl was feral, making the two elites flinch. "Either you go against Sakamoto with these jokes for orders and get lightly reprimanded, or you go against me and get a broken nose and a demotion. Your call, boy." The Anbu hesitated for a moment, before his face fell. "You have 1 hour to report him to headquarters to begin his training." "We'll be there," she snarled before slamming the door shut in their faces with a resounding thwack. As the lift continued to descend, she came down to a knee so that she was face to face with him, removing her mask and attaching it to her belt before she stared into his brilliant sapphire eyes. "You have everything right?" He nodded. "Don't let him push you around, Naruto. Don't let him do anything you don't like nor want. You got me?" He nodded again. She was about to speak, then stopped, tried again and failed again. Finally her face fell, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Look at me. The child I care for like a son is about to go into the lion's den and I don't know what to say." She felt her eyes glisten, but stubbornly refused to let them fall. The old persona as the ice cat coming into play for a moment. Tightly she shut her eyes and willed for the tears to stop. A hand was on her shoulder, startling her. She glanced up and saw him look at her with a genuine smile. "I know you're not my real mom," he said, "but you've been more of a mother to me than anyone else ever has. I was all alone in Konoha. I was hated, feared, and people even tried to kill me. You took me away from that. You gave me a home, a family, people who cared about me. You gave my life meaning." He seemed conflicted, scared and uncertain as he spoke the next few words. "I know this seems selfish, but can I still call you mom? You know, if we ever met again?" The tears flowed, and without a moment's hesitation she put her arms around him and dragged him into an embrace, shutting her eyes tightly as she cried, "Yes, I would like that, Naruto. I would like that so much." "You're going, aren't you?" She stopped, but did not turn around. "I love Naruto too, but think about it. He wouldn't want you to do this." "How else am I going to get him out of there?" Yugito asked, turning her head for a side glance at her younger sister. "Yugito One-chan," Samui whispered pleadingly, "if you do this then you will be labeled as a missing nin, Isama will not be able to defend you. You'll play right into that bastard's hands and you'll be in that cell beside Naruto. Do you think he would want that?" "I won't let him become a monster," the elder said, reaching into her vest and pulling out a small scroll from one of her abdomen satchels. She walked to her little sister and handed it to her. "Give this to the Raikage when this is all said and done. It will expunge you and Kirabai from any wrongdoing." Samui hugged herself, looking at her elder sister pleadingly. "Sis, please don't." She smiled behind her mask. "Goodbye, Samui." Before her sister could try to stop her, Yugito moved. Her attack was a blur, her hand chopping the nerves on her sister's neck. Samui's eyes bulged before closing. She fell into her sister's arms, carrying her into her apartment and setting her on her living room couch. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Looking back at her little sister one last time, she closed her apartment door and vanished in a flash. "Sorry." She ran across the rooftops, Naruto slung to her back. The boy was unconscious and sickly pale, obviously been put through extensive sessions of his training. She gritted her teeth at the word. Was this what could have happened to her and Killer Bee? Finally she reached the last building, seeing the huge vertical structure of the outer defensive wall of her village stretch up to the heavens. She stopped, feeling a sense of déjà vu. This reminded her so much of 4 years ago when she was scaling the walls of Kumogakure with this child on her back. Now she was doing the same thing again, only this time it was in her home village. Concentrating chakra into the soles of her feet, she jumped, landing on the wall and effortlessly running up the vertical structure. She reached the top, seeing an empty corridor which would have been filled with long-range specialists during a siege or a time of war. She looked back upon her home, her eyes, hidden behind her mask, confining every contour of the rocky structures to memory. Suddenly a voice resounded from the darkness, "Going somewhere, Yugito?" She turned, and her heart literally jumped up to her throat. There stood the Raikage, fully dressed in his robes of office, looking upon her with eyes as hard as diamonds. She was no match for him, no matter the situation. But something changed. He looked upon her, diamond-hard eyes softening before stepping aside. She hesitated, thinking for a moment that it was a trick. Then she walked across the corridor between the village and the outside world. She gave the Raikage one last glance. He stood with his head bowed, eyes closed as if in penance. "In 6 hours," he spoke, his voice saddened. "I won't be able to keep it a secret much longer. I will be forced to list you as a nukenin, and send a hunter team after you." He looked into her eyes, conflicted as to what to say next, then he closed his eyes and bowed his head again. "Go." She hopped up to the battlements, looking down at the seemingly bottomless abyss in front of her, but something in her stopped. She turned, locking eyes with the Raikage. "Sorry," she whispered, before she leaned back and fell from the battlements. Inoiki broke the meld, removing his hand from the girl's forehead before turning to the Hokage. "She is telling the truth on both accounts, Hokage-sama. In my opinion she is not a threat to the village." Hiruzen nodded. "Thank you, Inoiki." Stay a moment. He then turned to Yugito and smiled softly. "Thank you for your cooperation, I know that would have been difficult." She nodded, a hand on her head in a vain attempt to stop the drum pounding against her skull. Although the Yamanaka had tried to be careful, the presence of a foreign entity was still a stressful encounter. Jiraiya will remove the seal and show you to your new apartment. Until I gather a trustworthy team of Anbu, he will continue to be your protector, Sarutobi explained, sending a pointed look at the Sannin, only to find him nodding in agreement. Get a good night's sleep and prepare for the examination tomorrow. Yugito nodded, rising from her chair and bowing respectfully to the Hokage before turning to leave, the old sagely voice of Hiruzen reaching her before she made it to the door. "Oh, and if your examiner is a little late, don't hold it against him." She turned to him with a frown. "How long is a little?" Chapter 5 Assessment. All was quiet when the young woman excused herself and left the Hokage's office. It remained quiet for a few fleeting moments after, and only after Hiruzen Sarutobi took a long puff of his pipe did he turn to his chief information extractor. Chocolate brown orbs locked with dark blue for a handful of heartbeats. Then finally the old man closed his eyes in contemplation. "Inoiki, I want you to tell me whatever extra information you were able to glean from her mind. Her life, the circumstances surrounding their flight from Kumo, everything." The Yamanaka clan had nodded. "Of course, Hokage-sama, but my gleaning of her life was little to nothing. I did not pay much attention to those memories." "I understand," the Sun Daime replied, "but still, tell me what you have learned." "Hi," Inoiki said. Before clearing his throat and taking a breath, she was made host to the Bijou at the age of 2. Her parents both died during the Third Shinobi World War along with most of her clan, and what few members survived died in the border skirmishes with us 4 years ago, all but her sister. Hiruzen nodded his head. The Third Shinobi World War struck every country in the elemental nations hard. Kumogakure and her allies had been attacked by an alliance of Suna and Iwa, while at the same time Iwagakure was waging a war with Kumogakure to retake land usurped during the Second Shinobi World War some 10 years before. Many small nations had been swallowed up by Tsuchi no Kuni during that war, including Kaijin no Kuni and Usu no Kuni. Several independent shinobi clans, once numbering in the hundreds before the war, were almost completely wiped off the face of the earth. If she lost family to the border skirmishes, then wouldn't that mean she may not see Konoha in a good light? Jiraiya asked, truly curious. Inoiki shrugged. She mourned their deaths, but she held no hate to anyone. It seemed that she just wanted the war to end, and was happy about the upcoming peace talks. But when the head ninja revealed his plans, she felt disgusted and betrayed. "I see," Hiruzen replied, then motioned him to continue. It was while she stalked out of the hotel to clear her head that she ran into Naruto. He was being chased by a deranged old man and ran into her. Yugito protected him from the old goat, rattled him a good bit too, but then the fool spilled that he was a Jinchuriki. The Onwa tried to dispel her opinions, but obviously it didn't work. He stopped to catch a breath. The attempt failed and she was retreating to a rendezvous point when she ran into Naruto again. He was locked out of the orphanage, soaked to the bone. She took him and fled back to Kumo with a few survivors. Sarutobi hummed in deep thought, stopping a frown from forming. He was going to have Anbu bring in the orphanage workers responsible and send them to Ibiki for a few hours. Should scare them good. She took him in. According to her memories, Naruto was a mess, albeit a well-concealed one. It took her 2 months to get him to open up to her, another 6 months before he became a regular kid again. So what happened in Kumo to warrant their fleeing? An elder, Sakamoto or something like that, sabotaged Naruto's training in taming the Kyuubi, or so she believes. Inoiki replied he got the council to back him and overruled the Raikage. Naruto was forced apart from Yugito and her sister, and after 3 days she snapped and went after him. He shook his head, disturbed by the image of a pale Naruto, looking beat up and almost deathly tired. Whatever the man put him through was harsh, and if she hadn't have gotten him out when she did, then I don't know what would have happened. Both Hiruzen and Jiraiya looked at Inoiki expectantly, awaiting any further information. The rest you can piece together. She fled Kumo, had Hunter Nin sent after her, then she met Jiraiya-sama. The Sandaime Hokage leaned back in his chair, taking a long puff of his pipe. Silence persevered for several heartbeats before the Yamanaka clan head cleared his throat and spoke again. "If I may speak, Hokage-sama." The old man nodded. "It will only be a matter of time until the village realizes that Naruto is back, and while hatred for the Kyuubi has decreased over the years, it has not vanished, especially among the civilian council." "I agree," Jiraiya piped up, "and the fact that his protector is also a Jinchuriki will make them really fuss about it. Safeguards need to put in place for their protection." The Sandaime nodded. "The rule pertaining Naruto's condition is still in effect, we just add her to the rule. Simple as that, no one who already knows should know. Yugito is prohibited from using her powers in the village unless it is a life or death situation." Both men nodded. "You will have the support of my clan if their identities become known, Hokage-sama Inoiki spoke up, and while I cannot say for certain, you will probably have the support of the Akimichi, Nara and Inuzuka. The aging Hokage nodded with a small smile. Thank you, Inasihi-san. No, I have kept you from your family for too long, you are excused. Thank you, Hokage-sama, the blonde replied, before turning and leaving the office. Silence prevailed for several heartbeats as Sarutobi and Jiraiya stared at each other. Finally, after a long moment, the Sundaime Hokage spoke. Was there a need to reveal your position as Naruto's godfather? The Gama-senin shrugged. I stayed as a shadow once, and I failed to protect him. I won't fail a second time. Jiraiya Hiruzen said firmly, I understand your wish to protect Naruto, but your closeness to Minato and Kushina will raise questions on who the boy's parents were, and if rumors spread to other villages, then the boy's life will be at risk. I understand, Sarutobi-sensei. I understand that you want Naruto to be old enough to be able to protect himself before you reveal his parentage to him and the village, the Sannin replied, leaning forward. But I refuse to just sit idly by and watch any longer. I made a promise to both Minato and Kushina, and I will live up to it this time. So you plan on telling him that you're his godfather? The Hokage asked, and at his student's nod side, you know the question he will ask. And I will answer him. Sarutobi frowned, sagging into his chair. I can't convince you otherwise, can I? Too late for that, old man. The die has been cast. Yes, he replied, before finding something interesting about his desk. Remove the seal, and then take them to your apartment. Hi, Jiraiya replied, and for the first time in years left the Hokage's office not through the window, but through the door. With care he walked across the ringed corridors of the palace's top level, his nose picking up the smells of the worn oak walls and enjoying the fading rays of the setting sun. This was one of the first structures to be built, right under the grand cliff face of the Hokage mountain. This great building was the central pillar of the village, the other buildings and roads snaking from it like the veins and arteries of some great creature. Finally he came to his destination, and opening the door saw both Yugito and Naruto speaking in hushed tones.